All right, today is our November 19, 2018 meeting. It's 5 p.m. Thanks to Trinity Washington University for hosting this evening. We're going to start our public hearing portion of the meeting. I'm joined this evening by our Executive Director, Scott Pearson, down on the left, Don Seufer, one of my fellow board members, Naomi Shelton. My name's Rick Cruz. I serve as the chair of the board. Ricardo Ganjim will be joining us momentarily. Scott Bumbaugh, and then Saba Barreda, our vice chair, is joining by phone. Saba, can you indicate?
I'm here.
Excellent, we can hear you. Saba will be playing the voice of God this evening. We have quorum and we can get started. Before beginning the public hearing portion of the meeting this evening, I'd like to ask if there are any public officials in attendance. All right. Well then, I'd love to start us off with the public comment portion of our agenda. Ask anyone from the public who'd like to address the board at this time. We have a number of voting items this evening that we want to give an opportunity for individuals to share their thoughts on. I have a list of 5 individuals on our public testimony list. But a number of speakers with regard to Democracy Prep, whose name I don't have, Beverly West from National Collegiate Prep, or speaking to National Collegiate Prep, Quisia Kane from Lee Montessori, and Liz Koenig from Democracy Prep. So we have 3 seats to start with, if 3 folks would like to come up, and then we can get to whomever else has public testimony as well. We'll remind you, you have 2 minutes to deliver your public testimony. We also welcome you to submit it via email or in paper format. Right up here. So again, anyone that I mentioned, as well as anyone else who would like to make any public comments, now is the time. If you would just start with your name and whatever organization you're speaking to or representing, and then you have 2 minutes. Yes, you press that.
Hi, my name is Liz Koenig, and I'm not from Democracy Prep. I'm just interested in the issue of Democracy Prep. And I'm just here because I'm concerned about the process. When I saw the agenda come out saying that 10 Square had taken it over, as far as I know, this is a really unusual thing to happen with a charter school that looked like it was on the way to being shut down with the charter management organization pulling out. I thought there would have been like a dissolution through the charter, and as far as I know, 10 Square is a turnaround firm and not actually a charter operator. So I'm concerned about them being selected by this, and I was wondering, when this started to be talked about as an option, what meetings was it talked about at? I asked over here, I'm not sure this woman's name, was it talked about at the closed meeting on October 31st? And she said that was part of what it was talked about there. And I'm just concerned that it's up for a vote now with not enough public discussion around it. And I'm wondering whether there have been board meetings at Democracy Prep where they've talked about this and how it was selected. And will the contract be made available to the public? And also, is 10 Square still going to be exempt from the Public Charter School Fiscal Transparency Act in light of them possibly, going forward as the operator of the school?
Excellent. Well, this is the right meeting to be talking about this. We'll be talking about many of these issues as Democracy Prep comes forward this evening. So we appreciate those questions, and we'll work through and share a little bit about the process through now and to the vote. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, so I'm a parent at Democracy Prep. I'm also a board member, but I'm here to read a statement on behalf of a parent that is very shy, but definitely wants her information to be heard.
Excellent.
To whom it may concern, my name is Jennifer Smith. I have 2 kids at Democracy Prep, Congress Heights. I'm writing this letter to let you know that I believe the school should have its charter renewed, and I plan on sending my children to Democracy Prep next year. Satisfied with the education that the Maryland school system provided, my children required a rigorous academic schedule to better prepare them to thrive in their lives and provide great services to their community. Democracy Prep was exactly what I was looking for. The staff are committed, caring, supportive of not only my children, but for each other and for other students that enter into the doors. The children are excited about coming to a school where they can think critically, ask questions freely, and engage simultaneously conversations for furthering process their learning objectives. My children have made more progress at Democracy Prep than any other school attended previously. This school is in my neighborhood, and my children have attended Democracy Prep from preschool through middle school. Next year, I plan to enroll my child at Democracy Prep because I know that Democracy Prep is working hard to sharpen their minds of the children so that they will achieve at the highest levels next year. I believe in the staff, and while working with my children, they will achieve greatness. I hope you, the Public Charter School Board, will believe in the benefits that Democracy Prep provides all students that attend. Thank you for your consideration, Ms. Jennifer Smith.
Great. Thank you. And your name, sir?
Victor Battle.
Great. Thank you. Thank you both for your, okay, thank you. Very nice. Thank you, Ms. Smith. Does anyone else have public comment to make at this time? Just one more? Great, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, wow. Hi, everyone. My name is Taylor Stern. I am the assistant principal of the elementary school at Democracy Prep Congress Heights. And I just wanted to make a little comment about the growth that we have made this year as we've undergone this transition process. In the past, we have not had a local leadership team with local support who really understand the dynamics of what's going on with our kids and our families in Southeast DC. Starting this year, we really have had that, and already as you're walking along the hallways and in classrooms, you can see our kids learning and growing drastically more than they have in the past. They just haven't had the opportunity to do so to their fullest potential because of things that are beyond their control. In the past couple of months alone, with 10 Square supporting us, we've really thought hard about how we're spending our time with our kids and making meaningful instruction matter every minute of every day. And I think that we owe it to our kids and our families who need a community school in this building in particular to give them another chance to continue to learn and grow as much as they possibly can with as little turnover as possible. Something that they've really suffered from is inconsistency, and you can tell in our elementary school in particular where there has been consistency, it's changed a lot even in the past 2 or 3 months. So we're really fighting for a chance for Democracy Prep to continue, not Democracy Prep, but the school itself to continue to operate without Democracy Prep so that we have a chance to do what's right for our kids in the community who have gone through constant changes that are beyond their control.
Thank you. All right. Is there anyone else that would like to offer any public testimony before we turn to a handful of public hearing items that we'd like to open this evening? All right. Well, then I'll move to our first public hearing item here for Lee Montessori's enrollment ceiling increase and replication. Terry, if you want to bring up the team as well, the team from Lee.
Good evening. I'm Chris Pensakowski, head of school at Lee Montessori.
Good evening. I'm Bonnie Bestie. I'm the secretary on the board at Lee Montessori.
And good evening. Alex Brown, resident principal at Lee Montessori.
And I'm Terry Quinn, senior manager of the school quality and accountability team for the Public Charter School Board. This is a public hearing to discuss Lee Montessori Public Charter School's request to replicate its existing pre-kindergarten 3 through 6th grade program and increase its enrollment ceiling by 400 students from its existing ceiling of 297 students to a new ceiling of 697 students. If approved, this amendment would be effective for school year 2019-20. The school has not yet identified a new location for the proposed campus, but Lee Montessori has expressed interest in opening a campus in either Ward 7 or 8. Pending approval of this amendment, the school would be required to return to PCSB on a later date to seek approval for a new site once they find a facility. And obviously the representatives are here to answer any questions you may have.
Great. So whomever would like to kick off, if you want to share some top-line remarks, and I'm sure our board has questions.
Yeah, thanks, Rick, and good evening to all of you. We're really happy to be here. On behalf of the board, family, students, and entire Lee Montessori community, we're really thrilled to make this request that the Public Charter School Board consider our application to open a second campus. In the 5 years since we petitioned this panel to open our doors, a lot's happened, although it just seemed like we were up here about 25 minutes ago. In that time, we've learned a lot. And in addition to solidifying ourselves as a high-quality Tier 1 school, we've really seen the impact of diversity. And we've seen that both positively and negatively. To start with the drawbacks, it means an enrollment challenge, in that for every seat that we open, we see 2 applications from a low-income family and 8 from middle and upper-income families. Without an at-risk preference or an income-based preference, that means that we're serving fewer low-income families than we intended, and in my opinion, too few. We'd like that number to be at around 40% or at least 40%, and currently our low-income number is at about 25%. That said, we've also seen remarkable and enlightening positives. Not only are 2 kids from dramatically different backgrounds best friends, but they're also pushing each other to build strengths that they wouldn't have known or even valued if they'd been in a more homogeneous school. For these reasons and more, it's our belief that opening a second campus is critical to achieving our mission of using the Montessori method to close the opportunity gap for DC school children. We believe that we can, like our friends at Stokes, enroll a diverse population of families in Ward 7 and Ward 8, and bring a progressive model for a community that has for years been asking for a high-quality alternative. That said, we're also confident that our model, based in the belief that education should be personalized to every child, will be successful regardless of the population, and we're proud of some of the innovations that we've implemented at our school, including some really strong work around trauma-informed practices and a Montessori version of response to intervention. We're excited to work with the Charter Board staff and the board on this next phase of our developments, including community outreach and student recruitment, and everything else that's needed in the coming months. We're excited to demonstrate that a model where children are treated with patience, love, and respect can work for any community. Now, Terry asked me to be brief, so this is me being brief, and I'll turn it over for questions, so thank you.
As a board representative, is there anything else?
I think Chris said it all.
Okay, excellent. Colleagues?
Sure, I'd be happy to start. I appreciate the opportunities to visit your current campus. And if I do my math right, the number of additional seats that you're seeking approval would be for a larger second campus than a first campus. Is that how you see the configuration? Mm-hmm. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, so our current campus maxes out at 300 students. And over the past 5 years, we've seen that number, and part of, I think if you look at any of the Montessori schools, there's a painfully slow growth trajectory. But what we've seen at our current campus, while we might consider serving more, is we're space constrained. So even if we wanted to serve more students, we couldn't. But the number we're looking for is a small but manageable number of students. So 400 in comparison to a lot of the other schools we serve, a lot of other schools in DC, is still a relatively small number. But the number that I go for is how many students, what's the most number of students that you can have in a building where the principal can still know the names of every single kid and have strong relationships with most, if not all, of the families. At 400 students, when we've been talking and strategizing around that, we think that's a sweet spot of a number. It helps us get to be more financially stable, and just to a lot of us seems like the right number of communities to serve, especially when we're trying to provide this to another community, to more communities.
Okay, I thank you, and I appreciate that being thoughtful in those ways. It sounds to me like the constraint on the number of students in your present campus has to do with the facility and the configuration of the facility and the use of space. How would you apply that thinking to the second campus?
I would apply it when we find the facility. Yeah, I mean, we are thinking, we're looking across Ward 7 and Ward 8 for buildings. We're thinking really strategically and I think innovatively about how to think about that. We're stealing ideas from our friends at Wildflower who are thinking about storefront schools and possibly thinking about multiple campuses. We're talking with developers. We're looking at existing school buildings and the like. You're absolutely right. If we find a building that's 30,000 square feet, we would not, I don't think, be approaching our enrollment ceiling. I think, as all of you know, the nature of the facilities situation in DC is interesting. So it's really, you have to respond to the building you move into. What I would say is that if there was a building that required more than 400 students to work, we would most certainly not be interested in that because we would view that as too big for what we're trying to accomplish.
Great. And if I could, one more question before I yield. Could you talk generally about what your staffing strategy would be for the second campus? Would you move teachers from your current campus? How would you? I'll let you answer how you see best.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind, I'll answer that. We've so far already identified half of our teaching staff. Currently, we have our principal, myself, our family engagement coordinator identified, half of our teachers, and our academic coach. So right now, we're in a pretty good position to move forward. And the way that we went about doing that is kind of several different things. One, we created what was called a lifelong learner fellowship so that we could diversify our pipeline. And so we recruited from local colleges, colleges all the way up to Pennsylvania, and we partnered with WMI, which is Washington Montessori Institute as well, to get some of the teachers coming out of training. We also staffed our current campus with both trained guides and trained assistants. So once the guides now come over to our second campus, in this case, we have assistants that can take over that spot, and then we'll refill them with more assistants. And then we've offered even scholarships between like $60,000 and $100,000, again, to create a national campaign and a national search to diversify that pipeline. So right now we're in a pretty good shape to go to our second campus. We have to hire approximately 2 more teachers at this point.
And so my question would transition from some of the logistical issues to more so how are you planning to maintain the high quality that you have at your first campus and ensuring that as you open the second campus, you know, last year you all were tier 2. And just looking at how are you going to be able to maintain the high quality bar that you've set as you transition to a second campus?
Yeah, so I'd say, first off, in terms of quality, one of the reasons that we have always felt that Montessori was ripe for growth in DC and beyond, but especially in public schools, especially in diverse communities around our city, it's that a great deal of the model is consistent and predictable. It's a model that's demonstrated great results for a lot of kids around the country and the world, right? There are Montessori training institutes and schools literally around in the US, Russia, India, Japan, and in urban and suburban and rural settings across the country. So that's part of it, is because we're not having to develop a new reading curriculum, we're not having to develop a new way of teaching math, because our model is so predictable and scaffolded from pre-K all the way up through 6th grade. There's a lot more flexibility for us to work on the margins and develop and implement other innovative strategies, as well as to just make sure that we can double down on our coaching and classroom quality. Another thing I'll add is we're starting really small. We're starting with 4 classrooms of 90 kids. or 4 classrooms of total 90 kids in the building. And so it's going to allow us to identify ways in which we need to differentiate our model. As I was saying before, our model is steeped in differentiation. It's the ethos of everything that we do, so we know that every child that we serve has to be treated in a different way, and we design their experience around that. I do want to, like, on that note, defer to my colleagues to see what they'd have to add.
I think you did a really good job of summing it up. I mean, the only thing that I would add to that is that, as you know, it's an AMI accredited school, so the accreditation is another thing that's going to speak to the quality that you're talking about. So that carries over from campus to campus, so they're going to have a accrediting body that's coming to do those double checks and balances to make sure that all of the teachers are practicing with authenticity according to their mission, and as well as according to the AMI mission, which is the governing body.
Saba, can I ask if you have any questions?
Yeah, thank you so much. So, thank you for
Saba, can you? Oh. Saba, we're having a little trouble hearing you, so we're going to try that again. If you could speak more slowly. Okay. Yeah, I know.
So I'm going to hope I caught.
We're going to ask her to submit it by email as well, but if,
okay. I'll just take a stab at it either way. So our mission is to use the Montessori method to close the opportunity gap for DC school children. And we partner that with our theory of action, which is around racial and socioeconomic diversity. And we believe that that level of diversity, if we implement it with high fidelity Montessori, that will help students transform their community and transform their society. So we do look for that. But I would say that we have also planned for a realization that we may not get that diversity that we actually want, and we've already planned for that. We've been spending the last 2 years heavily invested in anti-racist, anti-bias work. We've done quite a few workshops around trauma-informed practices, identifying ACE results for students, adverse childhood experiences, and we have a great deal of wraparound services around RTI, child study, different response to interventions, as well as outside supports. And so I think no matter what we get, whether it's a diverse school setting like we have now, or we get a more homogeneous community, we're pretty well prepared for either one that we get. And I'm not sure if there's anything else you want to add.
Yeah, the only other thing I'd add is we're actually planning for a repeat of what happened to us in our founding year, which, as some of you who are here know, we had assumed having 70% or above low and free and reduced price income families. And again, we're serving around 25%, and that's been pretty consistent for all of our 5 years. We think, especially given what Eric has experienced at Stokes and what's going on in Ward 7 and Ward 8 right now, that's going to be somewhat of the norm. And so we are, as Alex said, ready to serve any population that comes through our doors, but we're anticipating that we're going to have a harder push within lower income communities, within Ward 7 and Ward 8. We're going to Berry Farms. We're going to other places where we can find families that wouldn't necessarily hear about Montessori. because we know that when we go to EdFest, which is where so many of our families hear about our school, that the middle and upper income families are going to hear about us and they're going to apply. In our founding year, we had that same strategy, and we were not as successful as we would like to have been. We still, like I said, are still getting overwhelmed by interest from middle and upper income families. We'd love to figure out ways to drive that up. We'd love for, and I've been saying this to the board for many years, we'd love to see more work around an at-risk preference in the lottery, but we're trying to make sure that we have that diverse school, that we have options for families that need them the most, and that we are ready to serve any kid that wants to get the great education that we offer.
Saba indicates that you answered her question, which she will submit to make sure we have it as a matter of public record, but also had a question about the continued, or your goals around preserving and increasing the diversity of the first campus so that the first and second campus are not pulling from different communities in ways that you might not like. So how do you ensure that your first campus does not become less diverse?
How do we ensure that our first campus does not become less diverse? Please. Yeah,
I'll take a stab at it. So when we initially start our second campus, it'll be pre-K3 and pre-K4, which means if we had any students coming over, it would be our graduating pre-K3 students going to pre-K4. If we were just looking at seats that would be taken from Ward 7 and Ward 8 residents, is only 5, right? We don't think we'll have that challenge at all. And then as far as like applicants right now, I think Chris mentioned, we have 2 applicants for every seat open. We have 90 seats with a total of 198 applicants right now. So I think we'll be fine as far as not pulling from our current seats. Yeah.
But is the question, how do we ensure that our low-income number doesn't go down?
It doesn't go down, yes.
Okay, okay. Sorry. Yes, because our school right now is around 40% African American and 40% white, and only 25% low income. But like given the 1,000 applications that we get every year to our school, like I just don't imagine. I can't imagine, even if those numbers go down 10%, that's the numbers wouldn't change that much. Mm-hmm. And to Alex's point, most families are looking for schools around their community, and that's who we serve, right? So most of our families are coming from Ward 5, or we're not. I don't think we're in Ward 5 tonight, but we're like right on the border. So families coming from around here as well. So yeah, maintaining a diverse enrollment at our current campus has not been a major area of concern for us. But the other thing to always keep in mind is that because of the number of siblings we have, that's always going to somehow control for our population and the trajectory of that. So that it should be, we anticipate it being very stable.
Okay.
So I'm going to pick up on this theme.
Yeah. Saba, we can't hear you very well at the moment, so. Steve, why don't you go to your question?
So I'm going to continue with this theme. First of all, I'm a big fan of a well-implemented Montessori model. It tends to be a model, it's been around for a long time, it's got an empirical basis to it. It tends to be consumed by higher income families and not low income families. I was very happy to see you all open up in an area that, if I'm remembering correctly, outside your front doors there's public housing. Mm-hmm. So I was surprised to see that only 12% of your students were at risk. Now, you're trying to change that. I imagine that's part of the motivation for going east of the river. There are a number of charter management organizations that have managed to recruit at-risk families quite successfully. The rocket ships, the DC preps, the KIPS, that's your competition east of the river. Do you have any specific ideas about how you're going to get families to enroll in what I consider to be, and obviously you do as well, a fantastic academic model if they've never heard of it.
Yeah. So first of all, great question. I'll lead into it with a story about how I personally got here. A few years ago, I was in a fellowship with City Bridge. And during that fellowship, we did tours of Chicago public schools, or public and charter schools. But I left one school with this knowing feeling that I had literally just left a prison. And so later that night, we were having dinner with the superintendent of Chicago public schools, and I just asked him the question, where are your schools that give kids freedom of choice? And what he said to me was, I've been to plenty of white schools that give kids freedom of choice. I've been to a few Latino schools that give kids that choice, but I have never seen one Black African-American school that gives kids that choice. And so I just left just thinking, here we are, X amount of years post-slavery, X amount of years post-civil rights, and we have never taught our kids how to operate within freedom. So when I think about this question, I kind of start there. And that's part of the reason it was important for us to hire an in-house family engagement coordinator. And so what we're doing with her is we're getting her out to the margins early, because when we think about our family engagement at our current campus, it doesn't differ amongst racial lines. Where it differs is socioeconomic lines. And so we want her to go out there doing parent education nights early and often as soon as we get approval. And she's already started to do some of those conversations, and she's having conversations with our current families about like, what do they need more? But we are actively pursuing that at-risk population so we can raise that number, because what we realize too is that our at-risk students that's in our current campus, they actually do pretty well, and that opportunity gap is closing pretty quickly.
No, I was going to, but I think that's it.
So just as a follow-up to that, because this isn't a model that is well known in communities that you're looking to serve, how are you planning or thinking about, and I guess this is more as a thought, what are you thinking about in terms of supporting families that come to the school? I think that it's really important that you're setting a foundation for students, but the idea of students coming home and talking about, well, where's my choice? So where are my choices in how they operate at home, and what are you thinking about in how you're supporting parents? And I ask that as a product of early childhood Montessori education, that when I came home and said to my mother, I don't see my choices in that, her response was very different than some parents would be. So as you're thinking about this, how are you thinking, are there examples of ways to support parents and how they operate with their children?
So I definitely grew up in one of those homes where we're like, you do as I say, not as, you do what I tell you to do, not as you see. So I understand that thinking, and I think the importance is, again, through me, through our family engagement coordinator, through our teachers, having conversations with parents around how do you bring Montessori into your home? What do those freedoms look like? What do those constraints look like? What does it look like to have freedom and discipline? What does it look like to have freedom and responsibility? There's an organization out of Minnesota that does, the school is called, help me out really quickly, City Garden, and they do this thing called Color Brave, where they train their parents to host events. It's my understanding they have never had less than 80 parents attend these events, and it's usually somewhere between 80 and 150 of parent-led Montessori trainings for their school community. And so I think that's the way we look to partner with that group. We're doing some of that work with an organization called Embracing Equity now out of Harvard that has been doing that work in collaboration with them. So that's something that we're thinking about as well. But I think everything is going to go back to the parent education nights, the open houses, sitting back talking at ANCs, wherever we can get, and even in homes, wherever we can get a space to just tell our story, what we are and how we do this work and why it's so important to this community specifically. And quite frankly, how Montessori was actually created in a housing project in 1907 for low-income and special education students. That's the win that we see for ourselves.
The only thing I'd chime in there is one of the amazing things about the model, which you lived through, which was the 3-year classrooms, right? So you have a child, no matter where they're coming from, they've got 3 straight years with that teacher. Every year, each of our teachers does a home visit with every single one of our kids. Every year, those teachers are having these intense relationships with their families, which they can develop over time. And we don't play the short game, we play the long game at our school, right? And so we're really doing everything that we can to make sure that we're not thinking about what, Johnny is doing at the end of this marking period. We're thinking, when he starts with us when he's 3, what's he going to look like when he's 6? And then when he's 6, what's he look like when he's 9? And when he's 9, what's he look like when he's 12? And that means that one of our students only has 3 teachers in 9 years. So our ability to develop those relationships is just profoundly impacted by that.
So can I just add one more thing? Sorry, I don't want to go on too much about this, but I think the other thing that we notice as educators and we work in these classrooms and we hear from parents is that, a little bit different than what you explained about going home and saying, where's my choice, is that we hear from the parents that they're so amazed by what it is that their children are doing independently and the things that they bring to them because of their experience in the environment. So I feel like that has more power and more impact than the opposite. I mean, they're both out there, but I think that is what I have heard that's been most impactful for parents, and they share that with amongst their peers.
One question I have is the parent awareness and recruitment will obviously be a big part of the work across the next year. And if we're sitting here a year from now, given that you're proposing to open in 1920, you will have been open for 3 months. So there's a timeline that drives a lot of parents knowing that you'll be open. So this is a hearing now. We'll vote on this, yay or nay, in December. Walk me through how the recruitment ties into the facilities, ties into the ability to, have a new school, open 9 months from now.
Yeah, I mean, and it's so much of it is the nature of the ecosystem, right? Like it's so rare that you have what we had, which was we landed our first building in, was it March? Was it March prior to our founding year? Where we were going into a former DCPS building, and so we could say, we're going here. We lost families after our second year because we didn't get to announce where our current building was. And even after, even though we announced it before the lottery results came out, parents were still, they'd already gotten their mindset that we're going to go someplace else. So part of that is just you get parents that are risk averse and want to make sure that they have a lot of clarity, and we will definitely, those parents will have a harder time applying to us. That said, we are confident, we have our partners at Building Hope and Building Pathways. We're working with commercial real estate firms to try to identify a space. We're confident it's going to happen. And then we need to immediately pivot and start intensifying our efforts immediately around that facility. We're already, as you can imagine, going into communities and talking to them about what the kinds of things that we're going to offer to Ward 7 or Ward 8. We've got our agreements with, we're working with my school DC to make sure that we're in the lottery on time, and then just making sure that we work the system. So yeah, we will. The number I always say is we got 180 applications from Ward 7 and Ward 8 to drive 45 minutes across the river. We lose students because their cars break down and they can't make it over here. We spend a lot of time trying to navigate resources so that parents can carpool and get their kids across the river to come here. The fact that we are, I think, a well-run school with a track record, I think we'll get a lot of support from parents that will give us the benefit of the doubt that we'll find a building and that we'll be able to move in on time and be ready for it.
Terry, if you could just remind us of what the My School DC start and close dates, or just so we have that as a frame of reference.
I believe it commences on December 1st.
Okay.
December 10th, and closes on March 1st for elementary, for pre-K to 8.
Okay. So if we vote to approve, we'll be, it's a team effort.
Right.
If we vote to approve, we'd be voting December 17th, I believe, is that right?
Right, so the vote is scheduled for December 17th. As Chris mentioned, and PCSB staff has also been in contact with my school DC representatives just to let them know, obviously we don't know the outcome of the board's vote, but to let them know that this is in the works and that a decision will be made by December 17th, so they're aware.
Can you go over how many applications you have or what your wait list looks like in wards 6, 7, and 8?
Ooh, 6, I don't know. I would say, so we had, I think the number, so we had 180 applicants from Ward 7 and 8 combined going into this past year. Of those, that's applicants. Of those, we don't have the results back for this past year of how many actually enrolled versus what happened of that. From previous years, immediately a lot of those 180 get matched with other schools, and so typically that number will drop down to around 50 or so from 7 and 8, and then as Alex said before, we enrolled 4 pre-K3 students from Ward 7 or 8 last year. What did we open? Around 35 seats, and of that about, was it 18 were filled by siblings? So, say 36 minus 18, we've got 18 available seats, and 20% of those were filled by kids from Ward 7 or Ward 8.
Any other questions from the board? All right. Well, thank you. Again, we'll be voting on this at our December meeting. Appreciate you guys coming out tonight. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Before we move on to the next item for our public hearing, just one more request. If there's anyone who wants to address the board about Lee Montessori, now is a next time to do that. All right. Well, next we have a suite of different policy and reports that we want to open up for public hearing. First is a policy revision around our ANC notification policies. So, Flora, will you be joining us for that?
Hello, my name is Flora Cabrera. I am the Executive Team Coordinator for the Finance Operations Special Initiatives Team. Tonight, we are holding a public hearing for the Advisory Neighborhood Commission Notification Policy Revision, which was open for public comment on October 15th, 2018. The proposed revisions better align DC Public Charter School Board policy with the Advisory Neighborhood Commission Act and the School Reform Act. DC PCSB's current policy does not distinguish between charter amendments that will significantly affect the surrounding community and those that relate to internal school policies and procedures, such as schools' goals or mission statement. The proposed revisions add this distinction. At this time, the DC Public Charter School Board received one public comment just before this meeting. However, the comment does not speak on any of our proposed changes, and we will address their feedback before the board meeting vote. The vote on the final policy will be held on December 17th, 2018.
Excellent. Thank you, Flora. Any comments or questions from the board? So as I read it, pretty much a refinement of our policy to reflect what we have been doing and making it clearer. So.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Very good. Thank you. Any public comment on the ANC policy revision then? All right. Well, then we are going to turn to our fiscal year 18 financial analysis report, the FAR technical guide. Josu, thanks.
Good evening. My name is Ezra Namadian. school finance specialist on the financial and academic quality team. Tonight is the public hearing for the revisions to the fiscal year 2018 Financial Analysis Report Technical Guide, which opened for public comment on October 15, 2018, and closes tonight. We consulted with the task force members in making changes to the technical guide, particularly for the debt service coverage ratio, and the final vote for the policy will be held on December 17, 2018.
I know we had some questions and some conversation when we opened it at the last meeting. Could you just sort of maybe give us a high-level summary of why the update for the policy now?
Yes. So there are two main changes that are going into the FY18 technical guide. The first is the current ratio, increasing the floor or the lower limit of our acceptable or most acceptable ideal comfort zone, I guess, would be it's increasing that ratio from 0.7 to 0.9. And to put that into context, the current ratio is primarily about turnover of assets that are coming due within the next year, and your ability to meet those obligations within the next year. And a current ratio of 0.7 really means that 70%, ideally in a perfect world, you want that number to be 1 or greater, saying that everything that's coming due in the next year has an asset that's offsetting, and it'll convert to cash and you'll meet that obligation. And as it currently is in the technical guide, a 0.7 would warrant, not to say that a 0.7 is the end-all, be-all, and it's the most negative thing in the world. It just means that it warrants some additional elevated oversight, and that's why we're changing that, to make sure that we're holding everyone to a higher standard. The second proposed change is in the debt service coverage ratio, which essentially it's a ratio that, for better words, is your ability to service your debt. And the higher that number is, it's like you are able to meet your obligations, you're able to service the principal and interest on your debt within that year. And as it is currently written, there are some significant non-cash expenses that are incorporated into that formula that we're making adjustments for that really help the LEAs. There's an overall positive impact of this change in particular for the LEAs to really represent what their ability to service their debt is, and we don't want to hold them, we don't want to harm their, by displaying financial metrics that aren't really reflective or the most reflective of their ability to service their debt. So this particular change in the debt service coverage ratio is positive to show, hey, we're making adjustments for non-cash transactions that really help show your cash position and your ability to service that debt.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any questions? No? All right. Well, thank you, Ozan.
Thank you.
Similarly, if there's any public comment on the fiscal the FAR technical guide, we would take that now as well. No takers on the financial report. All right, then our last matter in the public hearing today, Hannah, if you'd join us for the special education audit policy revision.
Hi, I am Hannah Cousineau, Interim Manager on the Equity and Fidelity team. This is a public hearing on the revisions to the Special Education Audit Policy, which opened for public comment on October 15th and closes today, November 19th. In this policy, we have updated the criteria and procedures that we will use to identify and address schools that may not be complying with all local and federal laws pertaining to students with disabilities. To date, we have received 3 public comments. One public comment came from OSSI, which has been incorporated into the policy, another from the Children's Law Center, and last, we just received a public comment from the Special Education Cooperative. These and all public comments will be considered for the final draft of the policy, which you are currently scheduled to vote on at the December 17th board meeting.
Excellent. Board colleagues, any questions?
Good.
Excellent. So we have the public comment that you said we just received. We don't have it at the moment. The board members don't have it at the moment, but we will have it.
No, you will have it.
Okay.
Yes.
Excellent.
And the same thing with the Children's Law Center. We received that one after hours too.
Okay, perfect. So just two additional pieces of public comment for us to factor in.
Yep.
And potentially an update of the policy.
Yes. Yeah, we'll consider their comments and weigh how we can either address them really clearly and specifically or incorporate them into the policy.
Excellent. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, if we don't have any questions from the board on those, thank you, Hannah. And again, invite anyone, if they would like to speak to the special education audit policy revision, now would be your opportunity. All right, thank you. All right, so we are now moving into our public meeting. Start with a motion to approve the meeting agenda.
I move to approve the November 19th, 2018 board meeting agenda.
Can I get a second? Second. Get a second from Mr. Bumbaugh. Okay, vote all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Saba, can I get a vote from you on the agenda? Excellent, thank you. We heard that very clearly. Thank you. Excellent. All right, so moving to first about the matters at hand tonight, we'll be voting to approve or deny charter continuance, 2 schools up for 5-year reviews, Democracy Prep and Harmony Public Charter Schools. So I think we're going to ask Nikhil to come up and present both of the schools.
Good evening. My name is Nikhil Vashi, and I am a specialist on the School Quality and Accountability team. The board will vote on the charter reviews of 2 public charter schools tonight. I will read the charter review standard once, and it will apply to each school. The School Reform Act, or SRA, is the law that governs public charter schools in D.C. It states that D.C. PCSB shall review a school's charter at least once every 5 years. As part of that review, D.C. PCSB must determine whether the school committed a violation of applicable law or a material violation of the conditions, terms, standards, or procedures set forth in its charter, as well as whether the school has failed to meet the goals and student academic achievement expectations set forth in its charter. If DCPCSB determined that a school has committed a material violation of applicable law, its charter, or has not met its goals and academic achievement expectations, DCPCSB may, at its discretion, revoke the school's charter, continue the school's charter, or continue the school's charter with conditions. Additionally, there is a fiscal component to these reviews. The board is required to revoke a school's charter if it determines that the school has engaged in a pattern of non-adherence to generally accepted accounting principles, a pattern of fiscal mismanagement, or is no longer economically viable. The review reports are available on our website, along with the full staff recommendation and any conditions to be applied. With this standard stated, the first school for review is Democracy Prep PCS. I would like to invite the delegation from the school to please join me here and introduce themselves.
Can I get them? Do we have enough chairs?
Sorry. Curtis Lawrence, Executive Director.
Jennifer Whiter, former board chair.
Alex Dejon, Board.
Victor Battle, parent board member.
Thank you. Democracy Prep enrolls students in pre-kindergarten through 8th grade. Since July 2017, Democracy Prep has contracted with Appletree Institute to manage and operate its pre-kindergarten program. The school opened when Democracy Prep Public Schools acquired the assets of a low-performing school previously run by Imagine Schools Incorporated. On August 10th, 2018, Democracy Prep announced that they would not manage the school beyond the school year. The school's local board of trustees had to make the decision to relinquish their charter, find another operator, or hire a turnaround entity. Ultimately, the board chose to enter into a turnaround agreement with 10 Square to help improve the school, should the board decide tonight to continue the charter. However, Democracy Prep does not meet the standards for review that I described earlier. They have not met their goals and have had declining performance for the past 3 years. The school had the lowest score on DC PCSB's Performance Management Framework last year, earning 20.8 out of 100 possible points. Despite these low scores, DC PCSB staff recommends that the board exercise its discretion to vote to continue the school's charter with rigorous conditions described in the proposal. We do not make the recommendation lightly, but when a school has not met its goals at its 5-year review, it has been our practice to give discrete and measurable targets that must be met each year instead, beginning in the same year of the review. The targets require the school to earn a score of 40 on the school quality report, also referred to as the PMF, this current school year. Regular check-ins with DC PCSB, limits to the school's enrollment growth, and requires the school to enter into a financial corrective action plan. Failure to meet any of these goals will result in the school closing. Staff from the school are here to speak and answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikhil. We'll certainly have some questions, but I didn't know if you all wanted to start with an opening statement or share some additional context. That would be helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz. Thank you, Mr. Cruz and board members for having us here this evening and for giving us a chance to respond to your staff's recommendations and share with you where we are as a school. I am Jennifer Whiter, the former chair of Democracy Prep Congress Heights Board of Trustees. Our current chair, Tony Williams, unfortunately, due to a family emergency, was not able to be here with us tonight. We are, as he is, disappointed because of the fact that he put in so much time and effort in preparing for this meeting tonight, so we do miss his presence, but we'll do our best to represent him this evening. I am joined with fellow board members Alex Dejon and Victor Battle, and also the current head of school, Curtis Lawrence. I am deeply humbled to represent the amazing scholars and families who attend Democracy Prep Congress Heights. Through our testimony tonight, we want to tell you what we heard from parents and guardians about what they want from this school, why they want it open, and what they hope for their kids. And we want to tell you how, from the board's perspective, how our school got into the situation that we now find ourselves in. I joined the board of Democracy Prep Congress Heights in 2014, and in 2017 I became the board chair and served through November 7th, 2018. In March of 2014, Democracy Prep opened with the management of Democracy Prep Public Schools. Over the last 4.5 years, Democracy Prep Public Schools has been the CMO, and our board provided oversight for the school. I'd like to walk you through just sort of a brief history of the school, along with the insights we have gained through this experience that we believe will be important to the school's success moving forward. I will be followed by Alex, who will speak to our process for planning for the continuation of the school, and then by parent board member Victor, who will talk about our parent community feedback efforts. First and foremost, on behalf of the board, we'd like to sincerely sincerely apologize for our failure to meet the expectations of the students, families, and the staff of Congress Heights. There is no question that we did not provide the quality educational experience that the community deserves, and we know that we should have done better. The success or failure of the school begins with and ends with the board. To that point, one of our most important learnings from this experience is that the constitution of the board was not sufficient to provide effective oversight of the school, particularly given DP's situation. While the board is comprised of very talented, capable professionals from all walks of life, we did not have the board that had the necessary educational and relevant financial experience to operate a takeover initiative of this magnitude, and we clearly see that as we look back. The lack of relevant expertise caused us to be overly reliant on Democracy Prep Congress Heights, the CMO, for the data and the insights into what was happening at the school. And so as a result, we found ourselves really in a decline that we could not recover from. We own this mistake, we have learned from it, and we are making changes to the way the board operates because of the very difficult lessons that we've had to learn. So just, again, talking about sort of how we got to where we are, and the plan going forward and why we chose to continue is that we believe that it is critical that we reconstitute the board. Back to my earlier point, it begins and ends with the board, and so we know that in order to ensure that the school is effective going forward, that we have to start there, and so we have already begun that process. Tony Williams, the board chair, is the board chair effective November 7th, at the date that I stepped down. And the entire board will actually be reconstituted by February 2019 with only 2 members staying on, one of which is Tony Williams, the board chair, and then Victor Battle, our parent board member. And we are partnering with charter board partners to address some of the things that I just talked about to ensure that the board recruits the right talent, people with the right background and skill set to be able to provide the type of oversight that's needed for a school like Democracy Prep. Part of what charter board partners will help us do is first recruit at least 7 board members, and in doing that, they'll provide some critical training and support around governance structure. They will also help us to determine the most appropriate committee structures for the board going forward, and at a minimum, ensuring that we have a stronger finance, academic oversight, and governance committee structure on the board. They will also organize a retreat for the new board to ensure that everyone is properly trained and on the same page about expectations and roles and the plan for the school going forward, and also to establish new governance norms and best practices. And also, they will conduct a governance assessment, and that is to give a baseline of the governance, for our governance benchmarking to best practices. And so we believe strongly that by really doing a deep dive into the board structure, putting the right policies, procedures in place, and getting the right set of skills to provide that oversight, that we could overcome a lot of the challenges that we experienced to date. In addition to that, we also have arranged for consulting services to provide counsel and capacity to the board, really with a focus on helping us to hold 10 Square accountable for its work, which is another one of the major challenges that we found that we had with Democracy Prep, is really having the right infrastructure, skill sets to be able to look for information, the most critical information that's needed to effectively assess how the school is performing and operating. We, as part of our process, a critical step was to agree mutually with Democracy Prep Congress Heights that we would terminate the agreement effective June 30, 2019 or sooner if the situation allows, so that we could start with, not a clean slate, but start with what we think would be a more effective operator or consulting firm to support the board. As a board, we realized in the summer that the CMO would not be able to meet the objectives, and we knew that that was an absolute reality as we looked at our PMF status and the likelihood that we would be able to meet the benchmark we needed to continue. And so that was really the turning point for us to begin making these, coming up with this new plan, but also assessing, what should we do as a board, and what's the best, the best direction to go in for the school. As part of a lengthy stakeholder process, we engaged with 10 Square, which is a proven school improvement partner. They're here with us this evening to support our path forward through multi-year school improvement. And Alex will speak more on this shortly. But I would also say that even before we decided that we would work with 10 Square on helping to operate the school going forward, we were thinking about bringing in a 10 Square type of organization to help us look at things like financial management and to be sort of an objective third party that could help us really provide additional oversight to the CMO. So that was something that we considered even before we went to this final decision. We know that we must take control of the finances, and as a board, we have the responsibility to closely monitor our progress in meeting the conditions of our financial corrective action plan. So in order to do that, we've taken some steps already towards that. We have issued an RFP to hire a third party, as I talked about just a moment ago, to take on the school's accounting, and we'll be issuing an RFP to secure an independent payroll provider. Again, learning a lesson that especially given our board structure, it really is critical to have that critical objective third eye to do that deep dive that will help us gain that additional insight. We also told charter board partners that our first priority when it comes to recruiting new members is to identify candidates with deep financial backgrounds and understanding. That was something that we lacked on the board, and so we recognize that, lesson learned there, that is going to be a critical, essential role on the board going forward. And we are working, to that end, we're working with 10 Square's Jeff Cooper, who's here tonight, to untangle our finances from Democracy Prep Public Schools, a process that is still ongoing. And he's currently getting up to speed, but we feel very confident in his skill sets. He's really well regarded as one of the best in this space, in the charter school finance space in particular. So we're pleased to have him as part of our team. We are committed also to holding ourselves accountable for being a highly effective board. That is the thing, probably the biggest lesson that we learned out of this process, I would say, is that we have to do better in that regard. And so we know we have a long way to go, but we do think we now have the supports to be able to make that happen based on what I just shared with you. Some of the ways that we're looking at holding 10 Square accountable is we've already begun the process of working with them around developing a dashboard, a more effective dashboard, I should say, to monitor progress towards the PMF and as well as non-academic goals, including suspensions, parent complaints, withdrawals, and staff attrition. 10 Square will report to the board each month on these metrics with comparisons to the charter and state sectors. They will report out monthly on compliance matters and submission. 10 Square will report on the school's finances, including key monthly financials, procurement, and ensure we will comply with the procurement condition and meet the FCA as required by the conditions, along with a third-party accounting firm. we now understand what we need to be asking for and with what frequency. Big part of what our challenge has been in the past. And then finally, we are committed to communicating with our families and staff quarterly to ensure they know who the board is and what we are focusing on in our oversight. We needed to have a much stronger presence in the school. That's another failing that we have acknowledged. But we think by having a much more intentional plan to have that presence, that we can overcome that gap, or the board can overcome that going forward. So with that, I would like to just say thank you for your time, and particularly to PCSB, because they really have been very helpful and candid in working with us in working through a process and a decision about the future of the school. So we greatly appreciate that help. And so with that, I would like to now turn over to Alex, who will walk us through sort of the process, how we got to the decision to hire 10 Square.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, board, mostly for helping us and guiding us through this last 10 and 18 months through this process. My name is Alex Ajon. I've been on the board since 2014, and over the last 18 months, I would say, as a board, we've learned more about what our deficiencies were, and that we weren't getting it right, and that we needed to do something differently to get it right, because our community, our students, our families deserve better. Starting this summer, we mutually agreed with Democracy Prep to terminate their contract and to explore what was next for Congress Heights. We started with parent engagement, family engagement, faculty engagement, reaching out to them to find out, do we push to close Democracy Prep, Congress Heights? What are the options? Because the forecast was not looking great for us. What are the options? And we learned from families, we learned from faculty, we learned from staff that this school is a pillar of the community. It's right on the corner, and this is part of their family. You have generations, series of parents who have 2 to 3 children in Democracy Prep Congress Heights, and we wanted to honor that. So to honor that, we started with taking that feedback, and we issued our RFP on August 13th, and we yielded from the RFP 2 entities, Rocket Ship and 10 Square. Out of the 2, the board really focused on 10 Square based on the criteria, and Rocket Ship stepping out as we move forward. We initiated conversations with 10 Square to figure out what was the best way and pathway forward, and what we knew based on their history, that they were family-centered, they will hold the community accountable, and they would make sure that each child will get what they need and we'll meet our goals. Honestly, we knew we had to get this right today. We didn't have another year, we didn't have 2 more years, but we had to get it right immediately. So we got 10 Square on board, and we're hoping that we can move forward in a most efficient and effective way. And I'll pass this along to Victor.
Hello, my name is Victor Bader, and I've been on the board for the last 2 years. A little bit about myself. I am a community worker right now, just working in the Washington Highlands community to combat a lot of the gun violence that's going on. So I'm literally engaging with the community already. I have currently 3 kids that attend Democracy Prep, and I have 2-year-old twins that I plan on registering next year to come to the school because of the great work that I've seen. They help me grow with my kids. 2 of my kids have IEPs, and they were in DC public schools, and they just gave them a piece of paper that said, hey, this is what you need. And me not knowing what my rights were, they were just providing services to my children that didn't even matter. Once we got to Democracy Prep, the whole IEP and everything changed, and they started learning. They started getting a lot of the services they wasn't getting from the neighborhood school right across the street. And to have that service provided to them, is a big difference. I've seen so much change in their behavior and their attitude because of what they've been through and the teachers that care in Democracy Prep. This school is so key to our community that a lot of the schools surrounding them have family members that attend their school. And with closing the school, it would displace all of the kids, almost 700 and something kids, to put them in lower performing DC public schools in the community, and it's only 2. There's no middle school, so the middle school kids will literally have to travel either to another friendship or something like that didn't have any space, or they would end up going out of the community in order to be educated. So this was very important and very key. And with that being said, we reached out to a lot of parents. You know, we put out surveys in the community. They gave us back feedback. We have 109 signatures that we turned in, I believe, already, and it represents 200 kids. Because of this process, we've been learning so much about what was not being provided to the students at the school, and the parents and the teachers really voiced their opinion about what did they want. And because of their feedback, it gave us a heavy decision as a board on what do we want to see from our school. So with engaging a lot of the kids and the parents in the community, they gave a lot of feedback about why this school should definitely be part. They wrote letters. And even today, about serving the teachers and the parents, we just picked up about 22 turkeys to provide to the community just today. So it shows you how much the kids are engaged, how much the parents and the teachers and the community is engaged with the school, because without this school, we won't have no educational system for the grades that we are currently providing at. Thank you.
Curtis Lawrence, Executive Director. I joined Democracy Prep Congress Heights this summer of 2018, and having been there, I've seen what the school serves and the need that exists there in the community. One of the things that has existed there has been working with Democracy Prep. A lot of these things that the board has spoke on, or things that had arisen as I continued my work here with Democracy Prep, and knew that some of the change that was necessary in order to make sure that our kids are getting better and getting what they deserve is something that I had supported. And I will say, so far, being able and having the opportunity actually to work with 10 Square and pulling away from Democracy Prep has given us some of the freedom and the ability to make necessary changes that fit the actual needs of our families and students. And so there is a fixed schedule that Democracy Prep has, but now with the pulling away, we're able to augment and change the school schedule that would allow us to have smaller class sizes, that will allow us to have small group intervention to meet the needs of the academic needs of our scholars, also to be able to address some of the culture issues in the school. We also have been working with altering or focusing our professional development with the teachers around the PMF. What does it mean, and what do we need in order to, what do we need to do in order to improve our PMF standing and improve our academics? I will say that before that was something under Democracy Prep we were not talking about. It was more New York City focused. A lot of our curriculum and a lot of the professional development, being able to work now with 10 Square on board, we've been able to reevaluate our curriculum, particularly in the middle school, which was New York City, very well New York City aligned, was not Park or DC aligned. And so being able to work with 10 Square and looking at that and beginning to make those necessary changes, and so that what our kids are actually learning in the classroom are things that they will actually be assessed on versus what's being assessed on in another state. And so I continue to look forward, if the vote is definitely in the affirmative, to work with 10 Square to make some of these necessary changes and give us the freedom to adapt the school to what actually the community and the kids need.
Thank you. Well, given the significance of the vote this evening, as you can imagine, I'm going to guess my colleagues have a fair number of questions, so whoever wants to begin.
Sure.
Ricardo?
Yep.
Thanks for the detailed explanation. In listening to the potential of raising your PMF score, almost doubling it this year, I am curious, what are those levers that you're really focused on, and what's changing for the student experience this year around those?
So, just capitalizing on what I was saying, in order to move the PMF, the things that we were looking at are our park performance, particularly, and also looking at our MGP to make sure that our kids are growing. One of the things that we were able to find, when you really look at the PMF, you see a stronger standing amongst the elementary school versus the middle school. And what we found is a lot of the curriculum, which is not proprietary to Democracy Prep, but things like Eureka and iReady were park aligned, and we were able to see stronger results there in elementary school. Once you get to the middle school, the curriculum being used was proprietary Democracy Prep. And so the curriculum being used was supporting a lot of the schools, or the 24, 25 schools in New York City, but wasn't aligned to what the park is assessing here. And so one of the things to be able to address the growth and the performance on park is making those necessary adjustments. The other piece also that I shared is changing and augmenting the schedule. The schedule was very fixed, which wasn't really conducive to get the necessary small groups and interventions that we need, especially for our middle school scholars. And so we have already worked and developed, we've got the input from families, we got the input from teachers when creating this, that will now allow us to have more cohorts in each grade, which will now reduce the class size, some which were as large as 32. And also will allow us to have pull-out groups, small intervention groups, to really focus on specific skills that the kids need. Something under the previous schedule was not, we were not able to do.
Great. So just to follow up on that, with the focus on the middle school, what are you doing to bridge for those kids who are in 7th and 8th grade who are kind of getting into that curriculum a little later?
I just want to make sure I understand the question. You're saying, what are we doing specifically for the 7th and 8th grade?
Yeah, to bridge them into this new DC-focused curriculum that you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of those things that we're doing, well, actually 6th, 7th, and 8th, to help bridge that, because it's something that existed up until 5th grade, is working specifically with 10 Square on, now that we have this freedom to begin to pull away from the Democracy Prep curriculum, looking at stretching some of the what was used in elementary school. So, for example, iReady, the Eureka Math, which was aligned to the park, that's something that's not in the middle school, right? And so as we do that, is pulling some of that into the middle school. And so I don't think it's this huge jump, if you will, and complete change, but making sure the type of questionings that they are seeing, the type of planning teachers are able to do will look different, right? And so an example is Democracy Prep gives them the lesson plans, and so it's, this is what your do now is, this is what your exit ticket is. So teachers then have that freedom to look at a curriculum and implement what the kids needs. And so I think that is not a huge jump that I see, but the work really is going to be getting the teachers, right, familiar with the curriculum and working with them on the curriculum. And so one of the things we're doing with our all-day professional development, as well as our Wednesday half-day professional developments that we have, we'll be working with the teachers to understand how to look and evaluate this curriculum, as well as how to plan differently now that you have that opportunity and have that freedom, and what are the key components in a lesson plan, how do you deliver that lesson plan, and so that our observation and feedback is focused more around instruction of the implementation of this new curriculum.
Other board members, questions? Don?
Yeah, if I could ask a few. So of the changes that you've been describing, and I appreciate the level of detail, some of them are, includes curricular changes. Do you anticipate that subsequent changes will require a charter amendment? to this board, and if so, what would the process for that look like in light of what you're proposing?
We don't anticipate that at this time, but it's something that as we continue to plan with 10 Square, which really just came under contract, I think, at the beginning of the month, we might have a better sense of that later in short order. But at this moment, we don't anticipate a need to revise the charter.
Okay, and then just to, not to put words in your mouth, but then in the event that should you review any of those changes and come to the conclusion, or perhaps engaging with our team, that they would require a charter amendment?
Well, I think the first thing we would do is make sure that we reach out to the community and make sure that any ideas, recommendations that we have for revising the charter meets the expectations, the needs of the school. I think one of the challenges we've had of late with the school is that we sort of, as Curtis indicated, it wasn't customized to the school and the community. And so we want to do a much better job of making sure that the parent voices are heard in that process, and then build the charter request around that as sort of the core, rather than sit in a room and of ourselves and make that plan.
And if I could just clarify, the recommendation is that the charter be amended to include all the conditions that staff is proposing for continuance. So you're asking about additional amendments other than these? Okay.
Yes. Also, I guess before I go any further, you are the former chair. You are currently a member of the board. I just wanted to clarify.
Yes, I'm on the board until beginning of the year, or end of the year, rather. And stepping in because the current chair is not available.
You mentioned in your testimony your board's commitment to upholding all requirements for financial transparency, and in light of the questions raised earlier, could you just come back to that and be very clear with regard to your intention to any requirements meeting financial transparency requirements under statute?
Well, speaking to what Jennifer mentioned, hiring a third party, we realized that we, as a board, didn't have that background and that strength to support the democracy prep the way that we need to, and hiring a third party to hold us and 10 Square accountable, that's our step and our next step moving forward. In the past 14 days, we've been running full speed ahead to try to catch up to where we were, what we didn't have, what we had not gotten done, and what we need to do to come to this meeting and to meet the needs of the students and scholars.
So I would never suggest that an explicit condition be that current statute be fully satisfied, but I just want to make sure that you're articulating that your board is, to the extent to which your board is being thoughtful about meeting all requirements for a third party, or that all requirements currently required under DC law will.
Absolutely.
And then my last question, and then I will yield. I appreciate your posture being so thoughtful and with respect to your board's past performance. And I ask if you were to look at the current accountability, the current school report card under the area of re-enrollment rates, you'll see that the school earned 0 points for re-enrollment rates. I wonder if you could speak to that in terms of your past performance and how you consider what the reasons and factors for that are, and how you see that being different moving forward under the plan that you're proposing.
Sure. So, and others can chime in here, but I think one of the critical areas for us was around just sort of instability in the school leadership and the staff, and that led some parents to walk away from the school. And so that's something that we are extremely dedicated to fixing going forward. But those relationships between the parent and the teachers and the school leadership were critical, we think, to keeping the parents engaged and building confidence amongst parents that the school was going to provide a stable, effective classroom for their students. So that was one of the key issues.
Absolutely.
Saba, do you have any questions?
I don't have questions. I think that most of my questions, I think Mr. Battle and his fellow board members know how to do with family engagement, and I'm glad to hear that there was more done to collect. I'm sorry, is there an echo there still with me?
Could you might need to send us your question, because I know you're asking about the family and parent engagement, but I want to make sure that we understand your question.
Okay.
While Saba's sending that over, what continues to bubble up for me is more so around, if we were coming to this point strictly because of financial issues, that would be one thing. But in looking at the last 2 years, and yes, the board being instrumental in taking corrective action, but in terms of what we've seen in terms for outcomes for students, does not provide a lot of faith in terms of what direction you all have been heading. 2016, Tier 2, 17, Tier 3 at 31.4%, and 2018 at 20.8%. Help us understand what corrective action, because yes, I'm hearing taking a different approach in terms of the structure or infrastructure for the supports around the school, that's fine, but in terms of the instructional outcomes, what help me understand or
Okay, I'll try. Just from, like I tell you, it's a community school, and over the last 3 years, we've changed upper management 3 times. So I think a lot of the times people are gauged and attached to other people, and when they lose their favorite people, which cause their enrollment to go down. And every time we get the enrollment back up, the newer kids come in and we can't predict where their education is. So when they test out, their testing is causing the scores to go down. And we've identified now, with 10 Square coming on and helping us identify where the needs and the strengths are, so we can try to work on getting everything back to where it needs to be.
I would agree with Victor, and I'll also add, 2 years ago when Jennifer became board chair, I became vice chair. That happened for a reason, because there was changes within the school. The previous board chair stepped down, and we knew we had to invest and go and do a deeper dive, because the reports that we were getting monthly weren't adding up at the end of the year. And we had to make some changes, and we had to do a deeper dive into what are corrective measures to make sure our students are learning. And if we were more informed as a board, we would have seen the alarms sooner. And so we started taking measures to unpack the information, change in leadership, and someone that we respected to really dive in and work with our students, meet them where they were, and get us to the point where we were increasing the scores. We thought that last year our results would have been different this year, coming in this year. That's why we knew by summer this relationship with the New York model in Washington, D.C. was not going to work. And it was a mutual agreement to separate. And it was an agreement on the board that as we move forward, first let's find out, does this mean that we fail completely and we have to shut the school down? But working with families and faculty and staff and each of the working groups, we realized what the school meant to the community, and we couldn't just shrink our job away and be complete failures. We had to make the next step. So therefore, we started the process and used the information from the working groups with families and faculty and the board to get to the RFP to find a 10 square to help us move forward. And then moving off the board, each of us staged out so that we can bring people on who can really hold us. It starts with the board and ends with the board, and hold the school accountable to make sure each of our students are learning. Did I get there? Okay.
No, I'll just add that I think while we used data, the goal is to be much more effective at using data. So the data that we gather, making sure it's the right data that we need to inform our decisions, but we're going to lead with data, and that's across the board, and particularly in areas like instruction. So monitoring how students are performing, trying to get ahead of that instead of being reactionary, but to be proactive around how we structure curriculum, but also around things like professional development for staff. That's an area that we were lacking in pretty consistently across the board. I think that's been the feedback from the staff, and that can cause a real impact on students' ability to learn, particularly as Curtis talked about, making shifts to align in the curriculum. Another key point, the curriculum just was not aligned to the goals that the school needed to meet, and that's just, we're very clear on that now. The model did not fit the direction that the students needed to go. And so curriculum alignment, staff professional development, constant real-time monitoring of data, and trying to also to minimize staff turnover and interruption in instruction for students so they can build that relationship with a teacher who knows them and their skill sets and what they need over time so that they can be more successful in the classroom.
And so to add to that, when you look at consistently the kids not growing, and then you dig in, look into some of the reasons why, some of which were already mentioned, but also when you look at the leadership change, and so the leadership team, just to be clear, is new this year, right? And so it's entirely new leadership team, and then you go back and look at each year, and you get in a new leadership team, so you're starting over each time. When I came in July, we had high teacher turnover as well, significant teacher turnover, and so that was something else in which we as a new leadership team had to take on. And so when you continuously change leadership and change teachers and you start over each time, it's hard for kids to keep growing, right? Because you're not creating that stable foundation. But I think one of the things that I've heard this year with myself and my leadership team working with teachers, to hear teachers say, wow, I wish someone I've been here 3 years, but no one had ever sat down to me and did a practice session, on how to and model the lesson before teaching, right? And so when you're looking at some of the things that we've already bringing in, and definitely with partnering with like-minded organization being able to do this work, to me then you begin to create the faith that the kids with these right structures and these right folks and the right development and coaching of teachers, and not just coaching around systems or just teach like a champion snippets, right, or tidbits, but really focusing on, hey, how do you actually use a do now to reassess if kids actually understood something, and use that as a reassessment before you move into the new lesson to make sure they're on point before you get to new material, right? How do you properly do a check for understanding or do multiple groups within a classroom? So when that is missing, plus leadership is turning over, plus teachers are turning over, then that growth that you can see in kids is not happening. And when you really dig into the data, when you see kids with 4s and 5s, and then because the leadership changes, you see a 2, it's not the kids, right? And so it's a matter of getting the right adults in the building. And the last thing I would say is from the teachers who have been there and who have been doing this work, saying, Why did they wait so long to get the right leadership team in? Oh, of course, like, I feel good, but for them to be able to say that the team that's here in place now is able to begin to make the moves and give them the support and development that they need, but that didn't happen before, it's going to stunt the growth of, of the kids. And so I think you have to look at all of those things as to why this hasn't happened, and these are the things that we're doing moving forward to create that the faith that you're looking for.
So I'm old enough to remember what the schools used to be like in Congress Heights. And when the charters came along, the promise was that the charters were going to be a lot better than the schools that were there before. Democracy Prep has the lowest PMF score in the city, I believe. A third of the families choose not to re-enroll every year. In third grade, about 28% of your kids meet the college and career readiness benchmarks. That drops to 0 by the time they're in 8th grade. I don't mean to pile on. I don't want to be disrespectful. I know you all work hard. I know you care about kids. I know everybody here cares about kids. But it doesn't feel to me like Democracy Prep is meeting the promise we made when we brought charters to the city. And our job, everybody in this room, our job is to do what's best for kids. So when I look out and see a school like Lee Montessori that wants to open in a neighborhood like that, the question I ask myself is, are the kids in Congress Heights, who have these disadvantages that they were born into, you said it wasn't their fault. It never is. It's never their fault. It's always the fault and the responsibility of the adults. So we all take our responsibility on this body seriously, and to me it seems so obvious that the kids would be better off if a school like Lee or another high-performing charter organization was in that building, as opposed to turning it over to an organization that's actually never run a school before. Where am I wrong?
We searched far and wide for a provider to come and look at our school. We walked through the process with a number of charter organizations in alignment with talking to your board, with people who are well more informed than we were, which we realized we were stuck in a bad place, and we reached out for help. From reaching out to the community, to your board, to other stakeholders, we seem to find the best fit for Democracy Prep, for Congress Heights, to help us move forward. We tried to get every charter organization to participate, to come and look at our kids, to come look at the facility, to try to engage and help us move forward. And we got a few nods, but we saw a best pathway forward with 10 Square.
And I would just add to that I think one of the things that we came away from this process with understanding is that I think for Democracy Prep, Congress Heights, at this point in time of where they are now, it's best to create something customized and tailored specifically to that community and to those students, rather than trying to retrofit them into someone else's CMO model. We tried that and that didn't work. That's why we're here now. So in some ways, it's actually, I think, a good thing that we ended up not having a CMO that followed through to actually apply and want to take on the school. We feel like this arrangement with 10 Square gives us that ability to really go deep in terms of really understanding the students, the school, the staff, really to get the data that's needed to create the environment, the structure, identify the right tools that are going to best serve the children at this school in this community. And so I think that's how we ended up here.
So I'll just add to what my colleague Steve has said. I think that looking at the performance of the school, it's been breathtakingly subpar. It hasn't met the expectations of those of us who are on the board to approve them now 5 years ago. As Nikhil started off the conversation with, we have a few choices here. We either approve with conditions and approve the arrangement that you've proposed and that you've gone through a process to select, or we close the school. And 700 students trying to find appropriate places. I think the most important piece that I've sort of struggled with and had to get my mind around is that the answer to the question of who's running the school has to be the board. And I think it's important that you've gone to the steps of not only bringing someone on board who can address the academic needs in the service provider that you've selected, but that you're bringing on professional help to help with the board. Because at the end of the day, that is where ultimately accountability needs to rest. And if that arrangement were not in place, at least for me, I couldn't even consider this because I think it's so important that whatever decisions are made on the academic side are being overseen by a board that has the tools. And to what Steve said, we all live the challenge of playing multiple roles in our professional lives and then your volunteer role. So thank you for that. But we're talking about kids, and we're talking about you're asking us to give this school another chance, albeit with very rigorous conditions. And we do very frequently do that at the 5-year mark, but it is a very, very tall order. So the conditions around board support are incredibly important to me. You've selected a service provider who has some record of being able to help and be able to support on turnaround. That said, it's a very, very tall order. I just love for you all to say a little bit more about how you all are going to live into that board governance role. And I know some of you are going to be turning over, and then others and sir, you'll be the last man standing from this group here. So just like and as a parent with hopefully 5 children in the school next year, why is it again so important that there be a school in August of next year where that building exists right now?
So I want to say it's about culture. We've learned, it's like you go through a math problem. If you can't get it right, you find out what part of it that you got wrong, and once you get it right, it'll run smoothly. And I think because we went through the entire RFP process and interviewing a lot of CMOs and trying to find what is necessary to get us back on track, we've learned where we was adding it wrong. So now that we know, and 10 Squares brought us in and say, hey, we can do things a lot better, and this wasn't right, and this wasn't right following the current model that you were on. Now that we're able to identify that, we're able to grow and build a new culture that's going to be more effective. And with the new board coming on, with people with different skill sets, and even with me as a parent, I've learned so much from what a regular parent walks in the day and say, hey, my kids, I'll see you back at 3:15, to being more engaged. Being on this board gave me a bigger insight to what is done on the background and what is set forth mentally to say, hey, this is what we expect out of a provider. And now that we are a board, that we're trying to put ourselves in a position to be able to run our own school once we're taught how to add it the right way. We have the 1. We're trying to get to 3, but we kept adding 1, keep on thinking we're going to get there. But when 10 Square came and say, hey, you can do it a lot better and more effective by just adding the 2. Because it was us plus Democracy Prep plus the kids, and it was a gap somewhere. So we're telling them, and we've been getting information that was, I'm not going to say misleading, but it wasn't direct to where it was. We meet with them, we say we need this. On the back end, the teacher saying, we ain't never heard of that. Now we're more engaged with the teachers. We're more transparent. We're actually sitting down with the teachers saying, hey, what do you want? I'm walking through the building now, and the teachers know who I am. If there's an issue, they'll bring it up. We'll send emails back and forth to the board. We'll get things done a lot quicker than sending a request up to New York to get a result to come back down 3 weeks later saying we can't do that. Which is where. In the working groups, because we have them now and they're coming, the teachers are on board that are talking, and people know who the teachers are that can bring the issues to the board instead of sending the email all the way up to New York and then get a response back, that we can control everything that was missing before to make it right.
Oh, so yeah, you did answer the question on the parental engagement. I will sort of, so Saba did have a statement just for, so that it can be formally on the record. I'm going to read her statement, and then I'll see if there are any other comments on the board, and then I think we might have the opportunity to vote. So this is Saba's, thank you, Saba, for sending this. This was a very difficult decision for me. I had the opportunity to speak with Mr. Battle and Mr. Dijon and study the staff's recommendation prior to our vote tonight. I was especially concerned about the displacement of such a high number of students and the closing of a neighborhood institution. I do appreciate the current Democracy Prep Board's effort to try to assess and act upon family input at the school. The question for me is whether students will be better served if they stay at the former Democracy Prep school versus another school. Democracy Prep is the lowest performing school in the city and has been on a downward trajectory the last 3 years. Democracy Prep's students will require years of support and stability to remedy years of past school failure. And to be clear, I mean the failure of the schools serving them, not the students themselves. I do not doubt that there have been some positive changes already with the involvement of 10 Square and the reconstituting of the board. But in order for this transfer to work, we must hold 10 Square to a very high standard, and if they're unable to meet it, the school will close. There's a very high possibility that will happen, and the students at Democracy Prep will once again face change and tumult in their school environment. At this time, I believe charter continuance is simply too high a risk to take with the 750 students in the current building. It's time to help these students transition to a more stable educational environment, and with months to go into the lottery, we have a rare opportunity to provide intensive one-on-one support to families as they think about their options. I can appreciate that this will be a difficult transition for many families, but I hope with months of lead time, we can reduce the burden on families currently in the building. I've also checked with DC PCSB staff to confirm that there is in fact sufficient space for Democracy Prep students at neighboring schools. I will be voting against renewal, and hopefully in closing this chapter can open a new, more successful and stable chapter for the students at Democracy Prep. So that's Saba's statement, a little foreshadowing of what her vote will be when we get to that place. So we've had a chance to answer some questions. I think we've spoken a bit to both the process around 5-year renewals and the fact that we do have significant precedent for renewing or continuing with significantly rigorous metrics, which I believe in this case we definitely have in place, rather significant metrics. We also spoke, you very eloquently articulate the process around the separation with the planned separation with Democracy Prep Charter Management Organization and the process that you went through in ultimately selecting the service provider you did. So I ask if there are any other questions or comments or statements on the part of the board before we go to a vote. Don?
Yeah. Not questions at this point, but comments. I think as she always has, our colleague does raise the right and most important and most pertinent questions in her statement. I agree that those are the questions. I come to a slightly different answer than she puts forward, and I would. First of all, let me, for the benefit of those in the public here and online, the conditions that are being discussed here are in the public record, in the meeting documents. I, for my part, am satisfied. I just think that these are some of the most stringent and rigorous conditions on a school's continuance that I can remember. To me, I think that they're the right conditions, and they're far-reaching and in a wide number of areas. So, while I would certainly agree with my astute colleagues' questions raised, for my part and for my vote, I believe that the conditions for continuance are adequate to address the questions that she raised, and I very much hope that that in supporting these rigorous conditions, should this board move in that direction, that your board and the subsequent board members and the organization representing the families at your current school I have full confidence in your intentions as a group and your everything that you bring to this process, and I would just very much hope that the conditions as laid forward are able to be met, so that the education conditions that Saba suggested are in fact the future for the students and families who choose to remain at the school. So those are my comments, and that's how I'll be voting.
So I would just add, I think to say that these are amongst the hardest of the votes that we make is an understatement. Is it harder to vote to close the school or to keep it open and put 750 students and families in the hands of uncertainty to some extent? I think having thought through all of the options, having looked at the proposal, again, both on the academic side and to ensure that this board has the tools, the supports, the team in place to make the right decision, I'm voting in favor. And I think you'll all appreciate that as a board that works together frequently, we don't always have to agree. I respect the dissenting opinion that Saba laid out. As Don points out, I think that it is amongst some of the most rigorous conditions, and that puts the school at continued risk. But I think for me, the right decision is to move forward. So we'll have the vote in a few seconds, and we'll see where we come out. All right. If there are no additional comments at this point, I would ask for a motion.
If I could, I move to conditionally continue the charter of Democracy Prep Congress Heights Public Charter School contingent upon the execution of a charter agreement amendment that memorializes the conditions as proposed by staff, and to approve the Public Charter School Board Chair to sign the charter agreement on the board's behalf.
All right. So we have a motion to conditionally continue the charter. Can I get a vote of ayes? Who would agree? Oh, sorry. Do we need a second? Okay, so we have a second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Just make sure. No? No. Okay. So we have 3 ayes? Okay. So then those not in favor?
No.
No. All right. So we have.
So the vote is 3-3.
So the vote is 3-3.
So so Sarah can correct me if I get this wrong, but I believe that in the case of a charter review as opposed to a renewal, which is what we're in, it requires a majority vote to initiate revocation of the charter. So in a tie vote, it sounds like there's no support, there's not a majority to revoke the charter. Somebody could, if they wish, make a motion to revoke the charter, and we can see if that passes, but it would need a majority vote. And if not, then the charter will continue without conditions unless there's another vote to continue the charter with conditions. So I don't know how the board wants to handle it. If somebody wants to make a motion to revoke the charter and see if there is 4 votes in favor.
We'll motion to revoke the charter.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if it remains, if the vote remains a tie, then the school stays open as is without any conditions.
Correct.
And how do we
Sarah?
then, how is progress then monitored?
So in the second option that you just noted, is it possible to add additional conditions at that point?
Sure.
Or would that need to be discussed tonight?
We could add them right now.
So I have a question in terms of adding any additional conditions. What are the conditions around the current leadership structure and who is currently managing the process of what's outlined here, but also ensuring that the academic progress is going to be maintained versus something happening and all of that stability going right back out of the window?
When you ask for leadership, are you talking about the board leadership at
school level leadership?
So staff.
Staff.
So what would you propose?
I don't have a proposal. I'm asking the question.
There is language that partly gets at, I think, what you're asking, which is that condition C is that the school will report at least quarterly or more frequently at DC PCSB's request on its progress in identifying new local board members and improving the governance and oversight functions of the school's board.
Of the board, but I'm talking about staff.
So one suggestion would be that they report quarterly or more frequently on progress in identifying school leadership as well as new board members and improving the governance and oversight. Or is that what you're getting at?
That's leaning towards that, but in terms of the current structure, as far as executive director, principal, et cetera, and any school staff, where are the conditions related to what currently exists and how that's going to be maintained versus there being another upheaval of staff or leadership, and that again putting us in the same predicament of things not having stability and students not receiving what they need. I think it's important that there are structural changes happening with the board, but if there's going to be something else that changes at the school level and students seeing this constant upheaval or turnover with staff, what that then does to the morale of not only staff but students, and how that then impacts what happens academically.
So are you looking to secure continuity from a staff leadership perspective through?
I would like to see something that speaks to that specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that means that this should be tabled for now. And I'm not sure if that means that because if the vote as it currently stands means the organization functions as it currently does, as it does as of today prior to the vote, then there is no purpose in that. I think this body being able to have discussion around what happens at the school level because of the academic outcomes, if we're going to be involved at that level of making the decision, I want to know that there's option to have that language added here.
Sure. And we could ask, for example, the school for a staffing plan. And we could also spend some time to figure out a condition that gets at what your concern is.
So we have a tie vote, and we don't have a clear path to make an informed decision tonight. my suggestion is that we stick with the 3-3 vote that we have now, and we figure out a way forward that finds its way onto the agenda on the December 17th meeting. I don't feel like I have enough information to make an informed decision about how to move forward right now.
That seems reasonable to me, Steve.
Agreed.
So procedurally, do we need to vote to table and move this to the agenda, or we just let the 3-3 vote stand as it is right now? All right.
Is Saba comfortable with that?
Yeah. Saba, any thoughts? I'm assuming you're following this.
Yeah, I think that's a complicated motion that Steve has made, so do we need to carry that through?
Sorry, what?
She said Steve made a motion to close the school. Was that seconded?
It wasn't.
Okay.
So is there a second for that?
I'll withdraw that motion.
Okay. All right. So we have a 3-3 tied motion, or a tied vote here. We will put this on the agenda for December, and we will explore, we've got work to do in between now and then to explore what conditions would address what you've mentioned, but then also if there are any other conditions that would make us comfortable.
Sure.
Did you?
So I just want to add this last bit of commentary. This decision does not come lightly in terms of where I landed, which my decision to land where I landed today was back and forth over the last few days and reading and thinking about how I would vote. Looking at this being the lowest performing school, all of those factors would bring me to an immediate sure. Let's move forward in revocation. The idea of knowing that there's a concerted effort to think about data, to think about what it means to have continuity in the school, and knowing that right now with Mr. Lawrence and his focus on utilizing that data to do what's best in the classroom really brought me back to then how do we make sure that the leadership at the school level is going to be focused. That decision literally went back, I went back and forth. If there are conditions here to not only address the board leadership, but making sure that there's continuity in some way in what happens in the schoolhouse, definitely has to be addressed and be addressed in a definitive way if we're to revisit this and move forward in December. But I think as Saba and Steve pointed out, 700 students and what happens with them, whether it be them having to travel because there's not another option or because they have consistently been underserved, is something that does not set easy with me as I go to sleep tonight. But I think there are ways to look at this in a way that we can help to support the families in getting the school back on track. So this is not a decision of I don't know what to do. It is, I know what to do, but I also know what is right. And if we can get to a point and place where that is outlined, I think we can move forward.
And if I could, I just want to really thank your board for the incredibly hard and conscientious work that you've done, not just recently, but in designing the RFP and following through with the RFP. And there's going to be a good deal of uncertainty and questions within your community. So if this board or our team can be useful to you in communicating to your families, I just greatly appreciate how focused your board has been and continues to be on the best interest of children and families, and in communicating and keeping your community informed between now and whatever time this board ultimately makes whatever decision that it ultimately does decided to make. I just wanted to express our gratitude and whatever help that this body can be in communicating with your families. Please count on us to do that.
Don, just to add on to that, I would say it is going to be very important to hear from your new board members who will be owning this going forward as we move ahead.
And I would just add, if we're going to think, if we're going to be revisiting, or if we're going to be thinking about the consistency of leadership, given that we'll be at December 17th and going into a holiday break, being able to come to us with data and evidence about practices that have been hopefully working, and you've spoken a little bit to it, but if we're going to be looking at consistency of leadership and how that plays into our decision and any condition, what does student performance and growth look like across this first part of the year?
So again, you all are volunteers. You're working hard without getting paid to do this, and I don't mean any disrespect to you, but I feel like I'm 20 years back in time when we had these same conversations about low-performing DCPS schools. There's always a reason, always valid reasons not to shut down a neighborhood institution. There always are. I've been on this board 3.5 years, and this is the lowest PMF score I've ever seen. So if this doesn't meet the requirements to shut a school down because there are better options out there for children who are woefully disadvantaged, I don't know what those conditions are. So I just want to state that on the public record that we're here to protect children, and I don't feel like we did that tonight.
Thank you all. We'll be in touch about the December 17th board meeting. All right, we'll be reconvening, and we're going to pick up where we left off on votes to approve, deny charter continuance. Nikhil, if you want to introduce the next matter for the board.
The next school we're going to hear from is Harmony DC. At this time, I'd like to ask the delegation from the school to please come up and briefly introduce yourselves.
Vanessa Mendoza, Board Chair.
Ted Eismeyer, Vice Chair.
Evren Kulha, School Principal. Yalçın Akilis, Harmony Public Schools, Texas, and Board Member of DC, Harmony.
Thank you. Harmony is a single campus school that educates students in kindergarten through 5th grade. Harmony is managed by Harmony Public Schools Organization, a charter school management organization that's located in Texas and runs an additional 56 public charter schools in that state. Harmony DC is the first Harmony school that operates outside of Texas. DC PCSB found that the school did not meet its goals and academic achievement expectations. Staff also determined that the school is undergoing a turnaround. In this case, the school's PMF and PARCC proficiency scores showed a strong improvement last year from the year before, signaling that the turnaround is in place. For example, while the school's academic achievement on state assessments has been below the state average, the school has shrunk its gap with the state average drastically in the most recent year of its review period, falling only 2 points behind the state average in both English and math. Separate and apart from the determination of the school's goals and student academic achievement expectations attainment, the school has not materially violated the law or its charter and has not engaged in a pattern of fiscal mismanagement. Therefore, staff recommends that the board exercise its discretion and continue the school with conditions outlined in the review report. Please note that a few conditions go beyond improved student outcomes. One is to enter into a financial corrective action plan with DC PCSB to ensure that the school stays in strong financial health. And the other is to increase its enrollment ceiling The other is to decrease its enrollment ceiling and change the grades that it can serve from kindergarten to 12th to pre-kindergarten to 5th. I'll turn it over to the school's leadership now.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to share a little bit more about the turnaround strategy that's been happening at Harmony this year. About a year ago, we had the opportunity in a board-to-board meeting to share a little bit about what was happening at the school. At that time, we found ourselves in quite a vicious cycle. Our low enrollment was leading to scarcity in finances, which was preventing us from really having the right supports in place to serve students and families. And that was ultimately leading to what we would expect, low academic proficiency and growth. That was then leading us to have even more challenges with enrollment, and that cycle just continued. Last year, when we noticed this pattern, the board realized there were only really two options at play. We give up the charter, close the school, or we find an investor who can help us turn the school around. We were fortunately able to secure $2 million over a 3-year time horizon last year to put into place turnaround efforts that allowed us to put a lot of additional supports and services in place for students. We can go into much more detail on all of those things tonight. I'm sure you have many questions for us. Some of the biggest were around staffing the school appropriately in the way that it really should have been staffed to begin with, and putting into place interventionists for both math and reading to help support some of the academic losses that we know we had caused in the first place. We were obviously very disappointed in where we had become as a school and knew that there was really only one thing that we could do to serve our students appropriately, and we feel like we've done that this past year. Some of the results of the turnaround effort that we've been able to see, so we are one of the most improved schools in DC. We've seen 13% plus gains in both math and ELA this year. We have been able to narrow that gap between our scores and the state scores, and have seen them go from double digits last year to single digits this year, and many of which are quite small, so 2% differences between the state averages. I think that's quite a significant change. We have been able to exceed the state averages in many different areas for subgroups. So for an ELA for Black, male, and at-risk students, we've been able to actually exceed where the state averages are showing that our students are across the board, and for math, for Black and at-risk students as well. So we feel like the efforts that we're putting into place have been able to be quite equitable across the different demographics that we know we're serving as a school, and are working for our students. We also know that growth is a big part of this, and we're seeing really strong growth scores, in particular in our math program. So our math median growth percentile passed the 50% threshold this year, which shows that our students are actually learning at above average rates than across the rest of DC students. And so we know that the turnaround efforts are actually allowing the growth to take place that we know should have been happening in the first place. We are seeing that that 50% threshold is true for all of our students and is hitting many of the different subgroups as well. The original source of this problem was around enrollment, and in the 5-year report there was some information about this, but not a lot, so we wanted to give you a bit of an update about where we are today. So today we have 112 students enrolled in the school. That is a 19% increase from last year. In terms of re-enrollment, last year we were at 51.3%. This year we expect that to be 75%. We've put into place significant efforts to engage our families, to make sure that we are seeing the enrollment and re-enrollment numbers continue to increase, and support the strong academic program of the school. This has all led to our PMF going up 15% points this year, leading us with a 45% on our PMF scorecard. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be able to be here, and we'll be delighted to share additional information as you have questions. And I'd also like to open the floor to any of my other colleagues.
My name is Yalçın Akıldız. I'm Chief Advancement Officer of Harmony Public Schools. We provide support for the school here, and I'm the board member as well. We like to say that school leadership did a great job identifying these problems first 4 years, and staff's report clearly identifies that as well. And when school was informed about this decision of low performance back in December, Harmony stepped in and helped a school find this $2 million grant for turnaround efforts. And they were in place in a few months. They had these excellent results, and we have to really believe that school is going to continue this turnaround effort and become a high-performing Tier 1 school, STEM-focused school in few years. And we really carefully read the report of staff, and it was a very true report, and we concur all the results, and we support that turnaround efforts next 5 years if the renewal is awarded today. Thank you.
Begin with any questions?
If I could just ask you to clarify on behalf of the Harmony National Organization. So we've heard that, we've heard tonight and in the past, that the operation of the school has relied on philanthropic commitments and gifts. And because there's been some change in leadership of Harmony's national organization, I would like to hear on behalf of Harmony's national organization what its commitment is to any future commitment to philanthropy, and you mentioned a willingness to provide the resources. I didn't hear clarified if that would be a philanthropic gift, if they're talking about a loan, but just to make sure that this board understands the commitment of Harmony's national organization and the benefactor of prior philanthropic gifts in light of what's being asked in terms of the process in front of our body tonight.
Yes, sir. Harmony Public School National Organization is committed 100%, and the $2 million grant was in form of grant from the foundation, not the school in Texas, but a philanthropic donation to school with the similar conditions that your staff put forward. We want to say nonprofit would like to see development every year. It's year-to-year commitment as your staff recommended. I believe foundation and the school already had the agreement before the staff recommendation came, but they just coincide each other perfectly. It is a $2 million commitment gift, and it is to phase out by year 4, so that school be sustainable by the time turnaround efforts is completed, academic achievement is out there, enrollment is already growing, and enrollment comes to a certain point that it breaks even, that school doesn't need those philanthropic dollars to continue. It is good education outcomes. So it was designed that way, and it is not loan, it is a complete donation, as staff recommended. And I believe we have in writing already provided to school.
Thank you for clarifying.
I do also have a copy of both agreements in case it's helpful for you as you're making your decision tonight, and I believe you may have received them in advance as well.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Could you go into a little bit more detail about the turnaround plan that delivered the significant improvements last year and speak to the academic sustainability plan versus the financial one? So thank you for that, but how is that going to continue this year and across the next few years to, as much as possible, ensure that we continue to see the growth that we would expect?
Absolutely. So I'll start by sharing just a little bit about the overarching turnaround strategy that we took, and then we'll go specifically into some of the more academic components, and we'll ask our school principal to go into more detail on that point. So last year, there were really 5 main levers that we determined we needed to focus on in order to really turn the school around successfully. Having better quality data, so a lot of our assessments, we were using NWA, for example, to assess our students, and we were not finding that in the end that was correlating with what we were seeing on the PARC assessment. So we decided we needed to have a better PARC-aligned metric that we could be using in year to assess the progress of our students and be making changes to instructional programming as needed. We also hired these interventionists to be able to do one-on-one and small group support for students, in particular in areas where we knew that they were struggling academically currently. So we hired a full-time math and a full-time reading interventionist to provide that sort of support. That was happening last year for grades 3 through 5. This year it's happening grades K through 5. And we are going to be bringing on 2 additional interventionists as long as our charter is renewed in the winter term. We also really knew that there was a strong emphasis on our teachers because this was going to take a lot of effort for them to be able to put in the time and the energy needed to turn the school truly around. And so we wanted to make sure there was a full success triangle in place for them. So both holding them to high accountability standards, making sure they had supports into place, and that they also had rewards in the end. So we had things like bonuses that were attached to student academic outcomes in the end. We put teachers' aides in the classrooms because they were saying they were having a difficult time managing the behavior of the students overall with the class sizes. We put into place additional teacher observations, professional development, coaching, things of that nature. So that was really the third lever. And then additional student and family supports. So we have a number of students that were requesting bus service. We're having trouble getting to and from the school, and so we put into place 2 bus lines last year. This year we've continued the one that has led to the greatest yield from our student population, from what we've been hearing from families. And we also started a Saturday tutoring program to help make sure that the students who needed the most support were able to have those additional instructional hours after school. And then the last piece was really focusing on that re-enrollment. So those numbers around the increase in enrollment and re-enrollment were really the result of having a full-time staff member who was really focusing on parent engagement, understanding the needs of our families and the students that were in the school, and being able to partner with them in one-on-one conversations, phone calls, things of that nature to retain students, and also putting into place all the sorts of efforts to attract new students. So canvassing efforts, putting booths up in pre-K programs because we didn't have pre-K to offer, things of that sort. So those 5 levers are really the big places where we decided to invest additional time and energy last year. In terms of the actual academic support, Efren, would you mind sharing a little bit about what that actually looked like for both math and ELA?
So our biggest challenge was not having enough resources to hire those additional personnel in the school, to be honest. So teachers were by themselves or sometimes with teacher aides to help students in need. But the city's average for PARC, college and career readiness is only around 35%. And our student body is similar. So basically, 65% of the students need some kind of intervention support in the school. We weren't able to have that intervention support prior because of, again, lack of resources due to low enrollment. So last year, we started getting funds from the third party in Texas. And with that, the first thing we did is hiring reading intervention and math interventionists. We knew that we needed that at least two people to help our students outside of classroom and sometimes in the classroom. So I guess that was the biggest thing we did last year. And also, with the help of those reading and math interventionists, we were able to we had data. We had PARC results from prior years, NWA results, iReady, but we weren't able to have an action plan on that because we didn't have enough personnel. So we put all of those data together and created a dashboard, so we knew where our students were coming from, whether they were re-enrollment students or new students. So we were able to get to the specifics of each kids' academic needs, and we were able to cater accordingly. So that was the biggest thing we did. And we hired our math and reading interventionists in the spring, so it wasn't the full year either. So this year, we kept our math interventionist and hired a new reading interventionist who has 8 years of experience in DC charters. So those two people will work with our K through 5th grade students, throughout the school year. So that's for the math part. With reading, reading was more complex than math. I'm a math person. It's easier to teach one skill and move on. It's like building blocks, but with reading, you need a better approach because there are a lot of components. You have early literacy skills, you have comprehension, you have writing, and we know, like, especially PARCC assessments require like high cognitive performance, especially with writing. We've seen our students were not able to write enough to get those points, and it wasn't just for PARCC taking students, 3rd through 5th grade, our K through 2nd students. We didn't have a strong reading curriculum. So that's why we supported our K through 2nd curriculum with a phonics program. So students leave 2nd grade ready to be a 3rd grader, which means they have to read more complex text, both fiction and nonfiction, and also they start writing. So we were able to add this year, and I think it will pay off a lot. In addition to this, as Vanessa mentioned, we use an NWA a lot in the school. It's giving a good data point, but it's not as actionable because it's not PARCC and Common Core aligned. So we utilized to some extent, but that wasn't enough. So this year, we partnered with Achievement Network, and basically with that, we were getting 4 PARCC aligned assessments, and also we were able to sit down with the coaches, to align our curriculum with Common Core, especially with reading, because math was proven. We're using Eureka Math like all other schools, but with reading, it wasn't as easy for us, so we were able to sit down with them and create an instructional model, especially for reading this summer, like 3 months ago. And they are able to get into the classroom. We do classroom visits with them to make sure that those intended curriculum is happening in the classroom. And also, we're utilizing their question bank, which has a lot of PARCC-like questions, and that's not just for 3rd through 5th grade, it's from 2nd through 5th grade. So basically, with maths, our yearly growth was 69th percentile, which was high, and for reading, it was 60th percentile. So we want to keep the initiatives we have last year with math, but with reading, we're adding those K through 2nd early literacy program in place, and also partnering with ANETs, not just for reading for math, but especially with reading, it's more important. Lastly, as I mentioned, especially with PARCC and Common Core has writing standards as well. So we adopted a writer's workshop curriculum. We were using the one in our current curriculum, but it wasn't enough. After our meetings with teachers and with interventionists, our ANET Achievement Network coach, we decided that we need to have a more structured curriculum for writing. So it started this September, we're utilizing that writing curriculum as well, because we've seen that the writing was the lowest scores for the PARCC assessment. So we want to tackle that by adding that 2 hours of extra writing lessons for each student. That's that we are doing for maths and reading. I don't know if you have any questions.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Additional questions from the board? Steve?
You talked about your re-enrollment rate a bit. Can you dig into that a little bit more? A 51.3% re-enrollment rate is really, really low. What can you talk to us about how that happened, please?
I can talk about it as well. So I've been with the school past 4 years. This is my 5th year with the school. Enrollment was the biggest problem for us, and we believe that it affected our re-enrollment as well. It's because we are right now we are the only charter school without a pre-K program in the district, including charters and DCPS schools. We believe that not having a pre-K pipeline was affecting our kindergarten a lot. So I can give you numbers, and you can see we always have around 10 students in kindergarten every year. And if you go through my school DC numbers, pre-K3 and pre-K4 combined applications are more than 8,000 every year, versus kindergarten is only 1,000. So if you do an average, each school get around 10 kindergarten students every year, provided that all those applications are converted to enrollment, which is not the case, as we all know. The percentage is around 30%. So basically, around 300 students changing their schools from pre-K4 to kindergarten, and that was biggest challenge. Why it's important for re-enrollment? It's because we couldn't have the consistency starting from the kindergarten. That was our biggest challenge. Secondly, this about enrollment. If there are more enrollment questions, then I can speak about them as well. But if you want to go back to re-enrollment, we had a similar issue with the re-enrollment as well, as I mentioned, for academics. So we know that all of the schools in DC have a enrollment and family engagement specialist. Past like first 2.5 years, 3 years, we as administrators and sometimes teachers, we were able to go out, do canvassing, which is something we need to do, basically to understand the dynamics and to present our own product. I understand, but we have a lot of obligations that we have to do in the school, all the submissions and everything. Obviously, the time wasn't enough to go out every day and connect with all those families. So we were fortunate to hire a full-time enrollment specialist and family engagement specialist, who is here, by the way, today, in spring 2017, and she was able to get through the enrollment season. And last year, 17-18, was the first year we had a family engagement specialist as a full year. So what we did with her, first of all, she was the contact person for all parents. So they had her phone number. They could call anytime to express what they feel about the school. Secondly, she was able to give personal phone calls last year in September and October, especially to the new families, to hear from them what they feel about the school. Are there anything that they need to flag that we have to do some interventions about? So basically, we were able to create more high-touch relationships, strong relationships with the families past year, 17-18. You know, the re-enrollment rates are coming a year later, so that's why we are projecting 75%. And I know 75% is lower than the sector average, which is maybe around 85, maybe 90%. But we want to build upon our cohort right now, and this we want to increase at 75 to 80, maybe 85, and get to the sector average as part of the turnaround efforts. So the turnaround efforts is for 3 years. So we're hoping that we will have better enrollments, hopefully, with the addition of pre-K and pre-K program, which is very important for us, and also by doing the same things, those one-on-one, basically, interaction with the parents. One thing that I can mention about it, just to give you some perspective, we have a lot of parents who withdrew their kids because their other child was graduating from 5th grade. So that was the biggest challenge for us. I can name like 2 parents. When they left, we left 7 students with 2 parents. And for a school, last year we had 94 students. 94 and 7 students was a lot, basically. It's basically more than 8% just with the 2 families. What we did with Ms. Smith, our enrollment specialist, we met with all of the parents to talk about their next year's plans. And if they had any graduating students. We partner with some other schools to find good middle schools for them. And we also try to keep our students in our building using our bus program. That's one other thing. So we have a bus for Southeast because we had some inconsistency enrolling and withdrawing and enrolling again like past years. So basically, we were able to sit down with all of our parents and hear from them what they think about next year. Their kids are leaving 5th grade. What about others? Are they leaving as well? What can we do to keep them in the school? So basically, we were able to sit down with all of them and have those conversations. And I can tell you that we had parents who initially said they weren't returning. I can name at least 5 of them. We were able to re-enroll those students over the summer. So I know it's not a lot, like you can say 5 or 6 students, but again, we're a very small school. And 5 and 6, we're hoping when we keep that 5 and 6, we will be able to keep more parents with that advocacy. So that's why we feel more confident with re-enrollments, and especially if we are able to secure our pre-K and pre-K program, we think with the kindergarten pre-K pipeline, it will get more consistent for future years.
Just one more question. You had mentioned those 2 contracts. Could we have a copy of those?
Oh, the contracts.
Yeah, thanks.
Of course.
Thanks.
Can I ask a question while you're... So a question related to the early childhood program. Could you give us an update on where you are in identifying a partner for that? And then just how you're thinking about balancing the continued turnaround work in the existing grades with the introduction of new work within the school. I think we understand why it makes so much sense from an enrollment perspective, a financial perspective, and a sort of increasing the time you have with students, but just those very practical questions for this year.
Certainly. So I'll start by just saying it's relatively new information to us that will be that the staff recommendation is that we be allowed to expand and serve pre-K 3 and pre-K 4. So we're still in preliminary stages of doing outreach to a few providers in the district that have a strong track record or a fairly strong track record of either operating programs on site or providing heavy support, either through consulting or through services to help other schools operate or to launch their own early childhood programs. In terms of an update, we've had initial inquiries and a productive in-person meeting with Apple Tree Institute, which I assume most members of the board are familiar with, as a condition of our continuance. It's been expressed to us that we partner with a very high quality provider because we understand that in expanding to serve those grades, it's critically important that we have the quality to back that up. We don't want to open enrollment to pre-K and not be able to provide a high quality experience. So we're exclusively engaged with Apple Tree Institute. There's 1 to 2 other providers that have been mentioned as possibly meeting the staff recommendation or the board's expectations in terms of the quality that you would want and expect from a top tier early childhood program in the district. In terms of, I don't know if that satisfies your question as it pertains to an update. In terms of how this balances with our broader turnaround efforts, I think that's the piece that is immediately at hand in designing the program in cooperation with a third-party consultant. I certainly think that we've spoken here about the way in which providing the early childhood component does tie into overall school quality, how it does factor into both parent satisfaction, enrollment, and re-enrollment, but also academic progress from the pre-K years into the early grades of elementary. So I think I speak for the board and for the school leadership in saying that we view the introduction of early childhood programming or the expansion of early childhood programming at Harmony as one of our turnaround strategies, hoping and believing that it will not only result in
So the staff is proposing the following conditions should the board vote to approve this application. The first one is engagement of non-military connected families. And the request is that by May 15th, 2019, the school would develop and submit a plan to engage non-military connected families in DC, especially Ward 8. The plan would include a comprehensive data demonstrating that there will be sufficient demand among non-military families to sustain the school, and a description of recruiting strategies that have been successful either in DC or other jurisdictions with competitive charter markets serving a similar target population. The second recommended condition has to do with enrollment. Due to the mixed historical performance of Learn schools and lower quality and lack of demand at Learn 10, enrollment would be limited to the current enrollment numbers of Learn 10, and the school will not open additional schools prior to opening Learn DC. By December 14th of 2018, the school would sign an agreement committing that the following conditions would be included in the school's charter. The school's opening year may have a maximum enrollment of 180. Enrollment each year may grow by 45 students to a maximum enrollment of 495 students. The school must open only with grades pre-kindergarten 3, pre-K 4, kindergarten, and first, though the school may open with fewer grades. And from whatever point the school opens, it may add one sequential grade per year until reaching its full size of pre-K 3 through 8. The school may petition the Public Charter School Board for permission to open grade 6 earlier. Granting of such permission will be at DC PCSB's sole discretion and based in part on the success of other schools in the Learn network and on progress toward opening and or operating Learn DC. And the school will open no additional schools until at least 1 year after the opening of Learn DC. The third recommended condition is that by below an average of 40%, the school agrees to relinquish its charter. If the school earns a Tier 3 in any 3 of 5 years, the school will relinquish its charter. The fourth condition has to do with an agreement between Learn and JBAB, that by December 14th of 2018, the school will sign an agreement committing that the following condition will be included in the school's charter. Any lease or other relevant agreement between Learn and Learn DC, Learn and JBAB, or Learn DC and JBAB must provide that should Learn DC relinquish its charter or have its charter revoked or non-renewed, Learn DC's assets, including its facilities, may be transferred to a high-performing public charter school through an asset acquisition overseen by DC PCSB pursuant to the School Reform Act. The fifth condition has to do with its bylaws and articles of incorporation. Learn DC will revise its bylaws and articles of incorporation to address to DC PCSB satisfaction any concerns about the appropriate autonomy of the local school board of trustees. The sixth condition is on the facility. Due to JBAB's selection of this school to work at a specific location for a specific community, the school must at all times be located within a half mile of JBAB, and that by February 1st of 2021, the school shall submit appropriate documentation evidencing that it has acquired a Title II or otherwise secured a sufficient school facility to DC PCSB, and the school shall update its financial projections as necessary. The seventh condition has to do with its 501c3 status, that the school by August 1st, 2020 shall submit its IRS receipt demonstrating it has submitted IRS Form 1023 to apply for 501c3 status, and that by May 1st, 2021, the school shall submit its IRS determination letter confirming it has obtained 501c3 status. The last condition has to do with its draft charter agreement. I'll go into that now. The school shall negotiate with and submit to be executed by DC PCSB a draft charter agreement that is consistent with PCSB's charter school agreement template, including all attachments, and the following sections of the charter application comprise the school's charter and may require revision and are subject to board approval. And they are the school statement regarding the mission and goals of the school and the manner in which the school will conduct any district-wide assessments, proposed rules and policies for governance and operation of school corporation, articles of incorporation and bylaws, procedures to ensure health and safety of students and employees, including the school's proposed discipline policy, enrollment ceilings, assurance to seek, obtain, and maintain accreditation, and relationship between the school and employees. Also having to do with the draft charter agreement, by January 15th, 2021, the school shall submit a first draft of the charter agreement. By March 15th, 2021, the school shall submit the second draft. By May 1st, 2021, all feedback and revisions will be incorporated to PCSB's satisfaction. And by June 17th, 2021, or within 5 business days of the DC PCSB board voting to approve the charter agreement, the school shall submit a signed charter agreement with all attachments.
Thank you. Thank you for indulging me.
So I'll just preface it as an Army wife. I have had a chance to visit military posts across the world, and I'm really thrilled for this opportunity for DC to bring a charter of this type with collaboration with the post and with the community. And I think that there's been, I was very impressed with the level of dedication to building community engagement throughout this process. I also had a chance to visit Learn 6 Chicago and saw the school in action. And this gave me hope for what the school day might look like here in Washington, D.C. I do want to give a note of caution, just based on some of the testimony we've had tonight, on the importance of really customizing your school to Washington, D.C. This is not Chicago, right? And so some of the things that have been successful in Chicago will be successful here, but definitely take the time to continue to build the community relationships with the base and with the community in Ward 8 in particular, to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the students here in Washington, D.C. And so with that, obviously, I'm going to be in support of this proposal.
Thank you, Ricardo. I'll take this moment to read. Saba is on the line, but just to prevent us from trying to interpret what she's saying, she sent me some notes that she'd like me to read. So this is from Saba, our vice chair. I deeply appreciate LEARN and the Ward 8 post efforts to introduce a new school model to our city. The LEARN staff has exhibited significant interest in serving both military and non-military families in DC. Every new charter application carries with it a certain amount of risk, and rarely do we have information from a CMO's other schools to help inform our decision. We've talked at length about the challenges of some of LEARN Chicago campuses and the need to see a higher level of performance at a school chartered in DC. Given some of these concerns, I believe the conditions proposed by the staff are entirely appropriate and will help ensure a constant focus on quality at LEARN's DC campus. Keeping the school smaller and bound by a very deliberate growth plan, paired with an assurance that LEARN will focus on improving its existing schools instead of opening new schools, will help provide guardrails as LEARN embarks on the ambitious task of opening a new school in DC. While I'm deeply appreciative of the Ward 8 post process, I am concerned that we do not have a more robust demonstration of demand from non-military families in Ward 8. I understand that the school has committed to doing more outreach to the Ward 8 community over the next 2 years, and I think the staff's recommendation that a concrete community outreach plan be a condition of the charter makes sense. I plan to vote in favor of LEARN because I'm excited about the school model and the potential for having a diverse, high-performing school at JBAB. I look forward to seeing LEARN's plans come to fruition, and I thank the LEARN team and PCSB staff for working together to come to a set of conditions that will help ensure a successful start in DC. That was from Massive Opening.
If I could, I think this is a really exciting opportunity for the families and students that are part of our community. I think that one of the reasons it's an exciting opportunity is it presents the military leadership at Joint Base Anacostia Bowling to provide to on their own provide resources that will benefit their families as well as families that are not immediately connected with the military facility within our community. In light of that, I wanted to first of all thank the team that did such a terrific job getting community deliberation and involvement throughout the whole process. I think the process was an example of such a process working well. And Scott, I'd like to thank you for your leadership, drafting, shepherding through, and being a champion for the legislation that made this possible. This is a really important step for the city. I would only add one other note, which is that in the course of the conversations with the leaders of the school, the notion of, although the exact location of the facility is not yet known, that the intent of the leadership and the commitment of the leadership to set it up so that should the school be located on the base specifically, it will be done so in a manner that all families and the guardians and adults and the important adults in the lives of the students of the school have full access to the school, and if the school is located on the base, that it be done in such a way that the rules of the school be welcoming to all families and guardians and adults connected with students at the school, even if those rules are different than those on the base. I think that's we've learned by experience that that's an important step, and I look forward to supporting this vote, and look forward to watching the school evolve into something that's important for our families, both on base and off.
Thank you, Don. Scott?
I just wanted to clarify one thing in the conditions. In both Condition 2 and Condition 2, it twice states that the school will not open additional schools prior to opening Learn DC. The first reference to school refers to the Learn network. In other words, that Learn itself will only open this school before it opens other schools, whether in Chicago or in other parts of the country.
And I assume that's clear to the Learn staff, even if it wasn't articulated. Okay. Steve?
If my understanding of DC law is correct, families that live on Bowling have preferences in terms of admission to DC public schools that non-military families don't have. We are voting on whether or not to open a school that gives these families an additional preference. I'm going to vote in favor of this, but I just want to say to the folks at Learn, it becomes additionally important for you to make sure that you're serving the students in what is a very poor neighborhood outside of the gates of Bowling. Those families have been here a long time and they don't have preferences. So it would be great to look up in a few years and see that you're adhering to a 50-50 school mix of base residents and the families that have lived here for a long time.
I'm just going to make a few comments without repeating too much of what's been said. You know, as we look at new charter applications each year, we look at a number of different aspects of the proposal. So the program that you're seeking to create, or the school seeking to create, the students and families that you want to serve, thinking with respect to demand, and what's the plan for building a community of stakeholders, including the board that the school has begun to build. For CMOs who seek to expand to DC, and Saba mentioned this in her remarks, we also have data from their current network of schools, the actual data, and then what we see as we go to visit schools. And like Ricardo, I was able to visit both schools in North Chicago and some in downtown Chicago, specifically the North Chicago schools that represent, as I understand it, a model for what you'd like to build here, or what Learn would like to build here. As we've mentioned a few times, as I think everyone in the audience will see in the public materials, and from our hearing in October, we've talked a lot about the inconsistency in performance and what our expectations are here. Some of the schools in the network currently are beating state and district averages, others aren't, and one school's in a turnaround. And it's hard to compare always data across the different contexts, but at the end of the day, we want to make sure that the school that opens here is successful and can meet our benchmarks. And I think that's what I found in my participation in this process, in the capacity interviews and the hearings and engaging with school leaders. Really thankful to Greg and Michelle and the team for showing me around in Chicago. It sort of reemphasized what I think I've learned in this work, which is it's a mix of science and art. We clearly are looking at the data that you all that the school has brought to the conversation, but we also had to dig into and what's the vision for the school here, and what's the community that is going to support that work. So there's a lot of work to be done across the next few years. The school has the benefit of some additional time to work with the JBAB administration to get the facilities and the partnership right. But it's that partnership or that ability to partner that certainly comes through in the community's feedback through the process that we've talked about now several times. And as Ricardo said, the context in DC is different, and as I shared at our last meeting, and as you can see from our conversations today, many networks who have come to DC have not been successful, and any school that comes before us now from outside of DC that seeks to expand is going to get those hard questions of what and how are you going to make work here. So clearly, by my intent to support the application moving forward, I'm hopeful, but I hope that the leadership has in mind the high expectations that we have. I don't doubt from your comments that you hold them as well, but that's obviously set against the context of some tough conversations this evening. That's as important to you as it is to us. With that, if there aren't any other, do you have? Okay. So I would entertain a motion if that is what we're ready for at this point.
I move to approve the charter application of Learn DC with the conditions proposed by staff.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Saba? All right, so we have unanimous approval. Again, I think a mixture of excitement, but also a lot of expectations ahead for the Learn team. And it would be wrong of us not to say, again, thank you both to the families and the community that have been engaged in this process. And I know we have someone from the JBAB here that, again, thank you for the opportunity to bring a school to that community. All right. Next, almost at the end, we have largely our consent calendar. So for those of you who don't follow us as closely, we have a number of items in the consent calendar that are not terribly controversial and broadly administrative in here. So we'd like to read all of these into record. Before we do that, just wanted to ask if there were any board members who'd like to remove an item from the calendar for further discussion or flag a recusal.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to propose removing the PMF technical guide item. I'd plan to support it, but I was a question raised by the leaders of the Association of DC Public Chartered Schools, an important stakeholder. I'd like to just give staff and opportunity to discuss that one a little bit. So I fully plan to support it, but I'd like to propose moving it out of the consent calendar for purposes of this vote.
All right.
For the sake of discussion.
Excellent. So, so then can I get, we will take that up in a moment. Do the PMF first and then, okay. Thank you. So Erin is going to come up and address any questions that Mr. Soifer has.
Hi, thank you. My name is Erin Kupferberg, Senior Manager of the Financial and Academic Quality Team, and our team does oversee the performance management framework, of which the 2018-19 framework was up for vote tonight. Hold on, I'm catching my breath. Tonight we received some comments about the tech guide and the items that are adjusted for the vote. This was based on public comment the board received through its July public comment period. Instead of staff responding and the board voting on a change in September, staff wanted to go back and talk to the task force to get more input, so we didn't make a quick change or make no change and a task force wanted to give greater input. So we wanted to allow that time for that discussion because a change could have made a really big impact. So we did internal analysis, we talked with the task force, and we thoroughly discussed all items that surrounded this topic of early childhood assessments, particularly using NWA MAP. And the task force had varying points of views. PCSB staff did not support the comment as it was proposed because it would give a flat blanket of up to 5% of students just not being tested. And the original intent of early childhood measures with our full academic business rule was for every student to be tested possible because the school can choose their own assessments and the schools choose their own testing windows following the publisher's recommendation. So we really have always felt for the last 5 years of including early childhood data on the PMF that we wanted to capture every student's growth who was with the school for the full academic year. And that was the premise we stayed with when discussing any potential changes we were going to make to this business rule.
And I would also add that the solution that we came up with, which is to continue to require everyone to be tested, but to provide opt-outs for legitimate reasons that somebody couldn't be tested, was then put to a vote by the task force, which overwhelmingly approved this approach.
Yes, thank you. So we did discuss with the task force and propose a more robust full academic year definition for early childhood students. I think it was maybe on the narrow end prior, and this now allows a student who enrolls in the middle of a window to be captured, not just on the last day of the school's stated testing window. So we really were able to have a very fair and accurate full academic year business rule definition updated that the task force did overwhelmingly support. We also have continued the discussion with our task force and said this discussion isn't a closed item. We are willing to consider changes in the future, but we just weren't at a place where we felt like any of the changes proposed were going to be fair to all students. And so we wanted to take some additional time and talk about it over the next year, so potentially for 2021 or future.
Thanks, Aaron, and thanks, Scott. I would just say that I think of all of the procedures and processes that this organization has in place, the task force process might be my favorite example of a process working best and really including all stakeholders. So I'm just grateful to the team for being so thorough and to the members of the task force for taking the time to really be so thoughtful in their work. So thank you, and I'm good with the measure.
Any other questions on this matter? So Sarah, should we vote on that and then go to vote against the consent calendar?
You don't want to read the PMF tech guide?
Not this. So if I could get a motion to approve the 2018-19 PMF policy and technical guide floor and target update.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Saba? Aye. Okay, so that motion has passed. Thank you, Dr. Soifer, Mr. Soifer. And then we'll return to the overall consent calendar. So if there's no other changes that a member of the board would like to make to that, can I get a motion to approve all of the items now in the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right, I got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Saba? All right. All right, so we are approaching the close of our meeting. Any new business at this point? Otherwise, we'll be prepared to quickly wrap up. All right. there's no business, I'll open the floor for public comment. If there's any last public comment that wants to be made this evening. Okay.
Good evening, everybody.
Oh, ma'am, could you come up here so we can hear you? Yes, please. Yes, yeah. That way we'll make sure we can everyone can hear you.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, Public Charter School Board. Good evening, charter school faculty and staff, parents, and concerned citizens. I am Beverly West, and as a mother of an excelling sophomore honor roll student at National Collegiate Preparatory Public Charter School, I am truly appalled to hear about the alleged derogatory remarks that were made by Naomi Rubin DeVoe, the Deputy Director of DCPS School Board, that NCP is not a real international baccalaureate public charter school. National Collegiate Preparatory is one of the few educational beacons of hope for high school students east of the river. National Collegiate Preparatory Public Charter is not only an international baccalaureate program, but it has a STEM program at the AP level. The faculty and staff at NCP are so qualified and dedicated that my son is continuing to thrive at the AP level, and I look forward to him to be able to start his international baccalaureate program curriculum next year. There are only 2 IB high schools in the District of Columbia, and NCP needs to remain open to give the students awards 5, 6, 7, and 8, a competitive STEM and IB edge. National Collegiate Prep is not only an IB high school, it's the only IB international baccalaureate high school left in the DPCS program, but it should remain open. The DCPS board should want to have an IB in STEM public charter high school that they can brag about. DC Public School has its Benjamin Banneker. Indeed, they let you know that they're the flagship school for the District of Columbia. DCPS Charter School Board needs to give NCP the same notoriety which they give Banneker. In the best interest of all fairness, an apology needs to be delivered to the student body, faculty, and staff at NCP promptly. The Deputy Director needs to show that she is familiar with the charter schools and in her network and the contributions that they are providing. Now that my son's school has been called out in a manner that has been, as it has been, I'll be watching the DC Public Charter School Board more closely than ever now. A school with great caliber of NCP needs to remain open, especially with students that are east of the river. Anxiously awaiting resolution to this unkind situation, respectively, Beverly A. West, NCP Public Charter School, proud parent of honor roll student, and proud PTO member. Thank you.
Ms. West, thank you for coming and sharing your remarks. As many of you may know, we'll be talking about the National Collegiate Prep review at our December 17th board meeting. So this will go into our public comments for that conversation as well. All right. If there's no additional public comment, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn the November 19, 2018 board meeting.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Saba? Aye. Great, thank you. Meeting adjourned. We'll be reconvene on Monday, December 17th for our December board meeting.